Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into ancient Egypt, a land of towering pyramids, gods that judge your soul by weighing your heart against a feather, and royal dynasties that were obsessed with keeping bloodlines as pure as temple wine. But here's the thing, behind all the golden sarcophagi and divine rituals were very human hearts, beating hearts, messy, reckless, passionate hearts. And when those hearts belong to pharaohs or the people around them, well, let's just say you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, what city are you watching from and what time is it there? I always like to imagine where you are as we float through these ancient hallways together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your sandals scuff softly across the polished limestone of the palace floor, still warm from the afternoon sun. The Nile is barely visible beyond the columns, its current whispering like a tired god in the distance. You've been summoned, not by a scribe or a steward, but by the pharaoh himself. That's never normal. You're no diplomat, no general, just a curious observer who somehow keeps finding themselves in the thick of dynastic brewing. Lucky you. You're escorted by a guard whose armour creaks faintly as he walks. His eyes never meet yours. That's the first clue. The second? The unusually hushed corridors, where even the breeze seems careful not to offend. Something's wrong, not war wrong, worse, scandal wrong. Finally, you're brought to a side chamber near the royal gardens, a place few ever see. Through the open doors, the scent of lotus and sycamore rides on the warm air. The pharaoh stands by a marble basin, tossing pebbles into the water. The soft plinks are the only sound for a while. "I've made a mistake," he says quietly. His voice isn't the thunderous command of a god king, it's a man with a weight on his chest, a mortal one. The mistake? Her name is Satra. And she's not royalty, not noble, not even farther free. She's a servant girl, technically, but one born of a conquered people from the south, Kush. The pharaoh's conquest in theory, and yet here she is, conquering him. The affair began as these things do, in shadows. The palace is enormous, filled with corners no one guards. She served wine once, spoke to him, just once, and instead of bowing, she looked directly into his eyes. That's how it starts. At first, the affair was cautious. She left pressed lotus petals under his pillow. He sent her small tokens hidden inside folded linen. They became a language, a code. Every day you notice him slipping, arriving late to council, forgetting the names of nobles' sons. When he speaks, his mind is elsewhere, his heart tangled in a world beneath the floorboards of the palace. It wasn't supposed to be love, it was supposed to be relief, distraction, but it became obsession. Now here's the problem. Egypt's entire religious and political system depends on Pharaoh being a living god. Gods do not fall in love with commoners. Gods certainly don't sneak out at night to meet them in servant quarters behind the spice courtyard. The high priests would rather bury the whole affair, and the girl with it, than let that narrative spread. But the Pharaoh is torn. In his mind, Satra is no ordinary girl. She speaks in riddles, challenges him, even calls him by his given name when no one else dares. She says she sees the man, not the crown. He believes her, and belief for a god king is dangerous. Now here's where things get weird, and by weird I mean just fringe enough that scholars still argue about it. Some believe Satra wasn't entirely human, that she was a sorceress from the Kushite borderlands, sent to bewitch the pharaoh. There are surviving scraps of court documents that refer to a shadow woman and whispers in the firelight, but it could be palace gossip, or it could be something far more ancient. After all, Egypt didn't just fear outsiders, they feared their gods being stolen by them. There's also a line in a forbidden scroll locked away in the library at Karnak that speaks of a night when the stars froze and a goddess of the south entered the pharaoh's dreams. Interpret that however you'd like. Historians disagree about how it ended. Some claim Satra was found dead near the lotus pond, drowned by jealous rivals or quietly eliminated by priests. Others say she was sent away in the dead of night, her name stricken from every record. And then there's the romantic version, pure speculation but kind of poetic, that the pharaoh renounced the throne, vanished with her, and lived out his days in disguise on the edge of the empire. There's even a small tomb in Upper Egypt with a carving of a king and a dark-skinned woman holding hands, something deeply unusual for its time. No names, no dates, just a feeling. As for you, you're still standing in that garden. The pharaoh has stopped speaking. The water in the basin is still now. He's looking into it, maybe trying to find her reflection. "I shouldn't have," he says, but you can tell he doesn't mean it. The letter is short, but desperate. You can feel the weight in every brush stroke of ink, trembling slightly as she writes. Ankhesenamun, once the Queen of Egypt, once married to the boy pharaoh Tutankhamun, sits alone in a shaded corner of the palace gardens, away from curious eyes. Her hands are fine, manicured, yet there's dirt beneath her fingernails, an odd detail you can't unsee. She's been digging for something. Or maybe someone. The papyrus rests against her knee. Her lips move silently as she rereads her own words, then hesitates and glances toward the sycamore trees. No one. Not yet. But time is short. Her letter is addressed not to a noble, not even to an Egyptian, but to the king of the Hittites, Egypt's ancient enemy. It's treason by ink, romance by Nefertiti, or perhaps something stranger. She signs the letter not as Queen of Egypt, but as the widow. Not even her name, just a title. She begs for a husband, not love necessarily, but salvation. She's offering a foreigner the Egyptian throne, asking him to send one of his sons to marry her. The queen of the world's most powerful kingdom is asking her enemy to rescue her from what exactly? You kneel beside her, unnoticed, a ghost to history. The garden hums with bees and sun-warmed silence. The Nile glints just past the wall, oblivious. Ankhesenamun's eyes are rimmed red, not from weeping but from fear. There's urgency in every flick of her wrist, every check over her shoulder. You don't need to guess what's happening behind the palace doors. Tutankhamun is dead, probably murdered, though officially it was an unexpected illness. He was barely 18, no heir, no plan, and the vultures are circling. Chief among them is A, the elderly advisor who wants to force her into marriage and claim the throne through her. He is decades her senior, and yes, also her grandfather. Egyptian dynasties, keeping it weird since forever. Ankhesenamun is cornered. No allies, no siblings, no real power. Just this one insane idea: escape. Her letter is smuggled out by a trusted eunuch, dressed as a merchant, heading north toward the Hittite capital. That's a long journey through unfriendly territory. She knows she may not live to see the answer. But doing nothing? That's worse. Here's where things take a turn from scandalous to full-on historical soap opera. The Hittite king Supluliuma receives the letter and doesn't believe it. He thinks it's a trap. Understandably. No Egyptian queen has ever asked to marry a foreign prince. Egypt is supposed to be the prize, not the beggar. But the letter is real, verified. They send a reply. More letters follow. Finally, the king agrees. He sends his son Zananza to Egypt. That's when everything unravels. Zananza never makes it. Somewhere near the Egyptian border he dies. Some sources say he was assassinated, ambushed by men loyal to A. Others claim he fell ill. But scholars generally agree it wasn't a coincidence. His death is so suspect that Supluliuma launches a furious military campaign against Egypt in retaliation. Nothing says, "You killed my son," like razing a few cities. As for Ankhesenamun, she disappears from history, just gone. There's no record of her marriage to Ai, no tomb bearing her name, no mention in later chronicles. It's like someone scrubbed her from the walls, and that's where the fringe theories bloom. Some Egyptologists believe she was killed shortly after Zananza's death, a victim of palace politics. Others think she was quietly married off to A and died a prisoner, forgotten and silenced. But a few out there theorists argue something far more dramatic, that she faked her death and escaped, that she actually met Zananza, and the two fled together, vanishing into the Syrian highlands under false names. There's even a remote burial site with inscriptions written in a hybrid of Egyptian and Hittite symbols, telling the story of a foreign queen who crossed the desert to follow her heart. It's probably nonsense, but still, something in you wants it to be true. You shift as Ankhesenamun folds the papyrus and seals it with wax, pressing her ring into it. The ring has a faint chip in the shape of a lotus petal, the symbol of rebirth, of cycles, of second chances. She looks up suddenly, almost sensing you. Her eyes don't meet yours, but they do search the horizon. Then she stands, tucks the letter into her sash, and vanishes into the shadows of the colonnade. The scent of crushed herbs lingers where she sat. By the next day, the court will claim she's betrothed to A. The wedding will be rushed. The mourning period will end suspiciously fast. The entire kingdom will pretend they're thrilled about their new king. But in quiet corners, some will whisper about the letter, about the son who never arrived, about the queen who disappeared. It's a reminder that even when you're royalty, when the whole world bows before you, love and power rarely mix without blood. And if you're wondering whether her story changed Egypt, oh, it did. After this, no queen would ever be allowed to marry a foreigner again. Not for love, not for power, not for anything. The gate slammed shut. You walk the same garden paths you once did, only now the air feels heavier. Like the past is still here, hiding under the leaves. The desert wind carries secrets. Tonight, it carries one more. You find yourself in the outer regions of the capital, Thebes slowly melting into the horizon behind you. The moonlight stretches over endless dunes, painting silver patterns across the shifting sands. A figure rides just ahead of you, hooded, choked, dust rising behind her horse like incense smoke. She's veiled in the traditional style of the Mitanni, foreign, exotic, and by Egyptian standards, dangerous. This isn't a diplomat. She's not part of any delegation. She doesn't belong here. And yet she's heading straight toward Ramses the Great. You didn't expect to be following a mysterious woman through the desert in the dead of night. But here we are. You're embedded with the royal guard under false pretenses. Don't worry, you've done worse. The guards whisper about her. They don't know her name, only her scent, spiced oils and something like crushed myrrh. They call her the ghost because she comes and goes without ever being seen by the full court. But Ramses sees her. He has always been larger than life. Even in his youth, he walked like someone born to eclipse the sun. Statues of him are being built before he even hits 30. But even pharaohs have nights where they slip away from the marble halls and into the wild edges of their kingdoms. That's where she waits. Her real name, according to a single fragment of scroll found centuries later, is Tadu-Hepa. Possibly a princess of Mitanni, possibly a political exile, maybe both. What she's doing here, alone, unofficial, and certainly uninvited, is the subject of hushed debate even within Ramses' most trusted circles. Some believe she was sent as a gift. Others think she escaped a collapsed alliance and made her way south seeking asylum. But there's another story, one that never made it onto temple walls. She was his lover. Or maybe still is. You arrive just before dawn in an abandoned hunting lodge near the cliffs of the Valley of the Kings. It's modest by royal standards. Only 2 fountains instead of 20. You peer through a crack in the doorway. Inside, Ramses is laughing. Not the formal chuckle he gives ambassadors, but something real. He's pouring wine into her cup. She sits cross-legged on a silk rug, face unveiled and the eyes sharper than the scimitars worn by his guards. You can't hear every word, but you don't need to. The tension in the room is not casual. It's magnetic, like watching 2 storms edge closer and closer until they meet with a crack of thunder. This shouldn't be happening. Ramses is expected to marry royalty, to sire heirs with noble lineage. Instead, he's pouring his heart into a woman with no official place in Egypt's bloodline. She is a question mark carved into the margins of his reign. The stakes? Massive. Egypt at this time is trying to stabilize after years of shaky foreign policy. Ramses' legitimacy is barely cemented. If it becomes public knowledge that he's sneaking off to entertain a foreign woman, possibly from a kingdom Egypt doesn't exactly trust, it could spiral into scandal or even rebellion. And yet, he returns to her again and again. You're told that the palace scribes are ordered not to record these visits, that the guards who accompany him are rotated constantly so that no one gathers too much detail. Some are rewarded handsomely to forget, others disappear. Still the rumours spread. Now here's the part scholars still argue about. What was she to him? Was it love, or was she leveraging him for political asylum? Some say she offered intelligence on rising threats in the Levant. Others insist she held some sort of spiritual influence over him, possibly rooted in foreign rites or magic. There's a papyrus fragment buried in a secondary tomb that refers to a lady of the storm wind who whispers futures into the king's ear. Not exactly subtle. One particularly fringe theory suggests that she wasn't just his lover, but the mother of one of his illegitimate sons, A boy raised outside of court, educated in secret, who may have eventually played a shadow role in military campaigns. There's an inscription in a Nubian outpost that references a prince of both red and black lands, son of the veiled flame. The nickname, if true, hints at her. It's romantic for sure, possibly nonsense, but it keeps you up at night. You slip away as the sun crests over the hills, painting the lodge in honey and fire. By the time the court wakes, Ramses is already back on his throne, eyes heavy but posture perfect. No one dares ask where he was, they already know not to. And the woman, she returns to the desert, always east, always alone. Eventually she stops coming, maybe she's dead, maybe she left, but some guards swear Ramses kept a small ivory comb hidden in a drawer beside his bed for the rest of his life. A foreign design, unmistakable, never explained. As time moves on, her story is left out of the official records. Ramses goes on to marry multiple queens, father dozens of children, win battles, lose a few, build more temples than anyone really needed, but none of them made him laugh like she did. The temple shadows stretch long across the sandstone floor as you press your back to a crumbling column, breath caught in your throat. You're not supposed to be here. No one is. This is the private courtyard of Pharaoh Akenatan, the heretic king, the sun worshipper, the rule breaker who dared to replace an entire pantheon with just one god, a 10, the sun disk. And yet all the theological chaos he's stirred up pales in comparison to what you're witnessing tonight. You're watching a pharaoh flirt with a commoner. It's not just any commoner. Her name is Becket, daughter of a craftsman, maybe a baker depending on which mural you believe. She's young, sharp-eyed and absolutely not royal. And yet here she is, seated beneath a papyrus awning, laughing softly while Akenatan, the king himself, leans in and whispers something that makes her smile like she knows a secret no one else does. She's not dressed for court. No gold, no incense in her no slaves fanning her every movement. Her tunic is simple, linen rough at the hem. She wears a reed bracelet, handmade, likely hers, and somehow that, more than all the ceremonial glamour of his queens, has captivated him. Now, if this were any other pharaoh, the affair would be shocking. But this is Akenatan. Shocking as his breakfast routine. This is the man who moved Egypt's capital to the middle of nowhere just to get away from the traditional temples, who closed the doors on centuries of religious orthodoxy and declared that only a 10, the sun, was worthy of worship. He's already alienated the priesthood, the nobles, half the army, and possibly even his own family. So a late-night affair with a lowborn woman? Honestly, it's almost tame by his standards. Still, it is dangerous. You see, Akenatan may act like a rebel, but his world is still built on ancient rules. Pharaohs don't marry commoners, and they definitely don't write love poetry about them. But scrolls tucked away in the ruins of Amarna hint otherwise. One fragment describes the girl with eyes brighter than a 10, whose voice silences even the temple flutes. A few eccentric archaeologists believe this is Becket. She may have inspired not just poems, but policy. Akenatan starts spending more time away from court. He disappears for hours into the garden pavilions, dragging scribes and musicians with him. When he emerges, he's euphoric, dishevelled, and full of strange new ideas about equality, harmony and love, not exactly traditional royal fare. And here's where things get messy. His principal queen, Nefertiti, begins vanishing from the official records. She's still alive, most scholars agree, but her presence fades. No more public appearances, no new inscriptions bearing her name. Some think she stepped aside willingly, others say she was pushed. There's one theory, whispered among fringe historians, that Becket wasn't just a fling, but a rival. That she began to influence court decisions, perhaps even rituals. That Akenatan tried to elevate her to an official role, even considered naming her a consort. A commoner made queen. That obviously didn't happen, but the very idea, it rattled the court. You overhear servants muttering about the baker's daughter who thinks she's a goddess. One even claims she saw Becket wearing a ceremonial collar meant only for royal wives. Another swears she overheard a high priest threaten to remove the infection from the king's heart. Then one day, she's gone. No funeral, no official decree, just gone. Akenatan is never quite the same after that. His reforms become more erratic. His health visibly declines. His poems take on a darker tone. The once radiant joy of his sun-god religion begins to wilt. Some say Becket died of illness. Others suspect palace intrigue, a quiet execution, a subtle poisoning. but the most persistent legend is that she didn't die at all, that she fled Amarna disguised as a servant, helped by sympathizers who believed in the king's vision of love over law, a single. The anonymous carving deep in the cliff tombs outside Amarna depicts a woman walking away from the city, the sun behind her and a small heart in her hand. No inscription, no name, but the image feels like a goodbye. Even modern scholars can't agree on whether Becket existed. She's a ghost in the records, a rumour in the rubble, but you saw her. You were there, behind the column, when the most controversial pharaoh in history leaned in and told her something that made her laugh until she had to cover her mouth. And here's the historical curveball. Some researchers believe that a child born around that time, never officially acknowledged, may have been the product of this union. A child with unusual features, raised in secret, possibly sent to live in a village near the Nile Delta. No one can prove it. But a single mummy found buried without royal marking shows signs of mixed lineage, and DNA testing has only deepened the mystery. That child, if real, would have been half divine, half commoner. A union of sun and soil, the embodiment of everything Akenatan believed in, and everything the old order hated. As the sun rises over the crumbling temples of Amarna, casting long golden rays across empty courtyards, you can almost feel the shadow of Becket still moving through them. She may not have been a queen by title, but in that brief, bright rebellion of a relationship, she ruled something far more rare, the pharaoh's unguarded heart. And as with all dangerous truths, history made sure to bury her deeply. The alabaster floor is cool beneath your feet as you wander deeper into the inner chambers of the palace. The torches flicker low, their glow casting soft ripples along the sandstone walls etched with scenes of worship, war, and royal glory. But none of them show this. None of them tell the story you're following now, because if they did, someone would have scraped them off long ago. Nefertiti, the legendary beauty, queen of Akenatan, mother to 6 daughters, co-ruler of Egypt at the height of one of its strangest religious revolutions, wasn't just the passive, perfect figure carved on temple columns. Tonight, you're learning she had a mind sharper than any blade, and a heart that didn't always follow the rules. It begins quietly, whispers among the staff, a change in routine, a royal scribe who no longer eats in the servants' hall, but is summoned to the queen's chambers after dusk. His name is Ki-Am, hand stained with ink, voice like honey. Known for transcribing prayers and drafting laws under Akenaton's increasingly chaotic rule. Not a warrior, not noble, just a man with a scroll, a pen, and apparently something that caught Nefertiti's eye. You trail him one night, careful not to make a sound as he slips past the lotus pool and vanishes behind a hanging curtain of beads. The guards stationed nearby look the other way. That's your first clue. What happens inside those chambers isn't written down. No scribes record it, no records survive. But what does remain are a few strange and heavily debated letters, found centuries later in a sealed jar behind a false wall in Amarna. Love notes, some say, or veiled poetry. They're unsigned, but the handwriting matches Ki-Am's style, and they're addressed to a star of Aten, a title used for one woman only, Nefertiti. The tone of the letters is surprisingly candid. There's humour, teasing, even the occasional line of deep, aching loneliness. One note ends with the words, "Let us write a world together, one the gods must pretend not to see." Romantic? Absolutely, but also very, very dangerous, because at this point, Nefertiti's position is complicated. She's no longer just queen, she may have been ruling alongside Akenatan, or possibly even in his place. Some believe she adopted a male persona and briefly ruled as Pharaoh Neferneferuetan after her husband's death, though the identity behind that name remains hotly debated. If she was Pharaoh, even briefly, then her affair with a court scribe wasn't just forbidden, it was blasphemy. A living deity consorting with a mortal, not just crossing the line, but erasing it entirely. You press your fingers against a faded mural in her chamber. Beneath the outer layer of paint, recent restorations suggest, there's a figure that was intentionally scrubbed out. A man standing close to the queen, holding not a weapon but a scroll. Some say it's just an attendant. Others are convinced it's Ki-Am. Here's the strange part. The disappearance of Nefertiti from official records aligns suspiciously well with the rise of that erased name, Neferneferuetan. Some fringe scholars argue that Nefertiti didn't die, wasn't exiled, and wasn't erased. She simply changed form, took power in a new way. And if that's true, and the rumours of her affair with Ki-Am are too, Then Egypt was briefly ruled by a queen in disguise, writing secret poetry to a man who had no throne, no name, and no right to love her. But wait, it gets messier. A newly excavated crypt near Amarna contains a mural of two figures, both in royal garb, both offering the same gift to Aten. One appears to be female, the other male. Their arms are intertwined. What's bizarre is that both wear the same crown. The double-plumed headdress, usually reserved for ruling pharaohs. The faces are damaged, gouged out deliberately. But what remains is suggestive. Two co-rulers, possibly lovers, united not by marriage or blood, but by something else entirely. Your fingertips tingle as you imagine the implications. A queen who seized power, rewriting the rules of dynasty while simultaneously hiding a forbidden affair behind poetry and coded ceremony. Egypt's most beautiful queen, icon of grace, elegance, and divine virtue, risking everything for a man who composed odes instead of battle strategies. The official history would have none of it. Khem disappears from records. Entire pages of court scrolls are lost from the years surrounding Akhenaten's death. And Nefertiti? She vanishes completely, only to maybe, possibly reappear as someone else. Of course, traditional historians call the affair nothing more than speculation. They argue that the letters were metaphor, that the murals show ceremonial closeness, not intimacy. But fringe theorists, the kind who read between the glyphs, whisper that the love between Nefertiti and Khem was real, and that it changed everything. That her boldness, her refusal to be just a consort, was fueled not just by ambition, but by the rarest thing in royal Egypt, emotional honesty. You leave the chamber quietly. The beads part behind you, their soft clink echoing like distant chimes. The moonlight filters through high windows, and for a moment you imagine her there, standing with her scroll writer, fingers entwined in defiance of gods and kings. In a world where alliances were political, where even affection was ritualized, what Nefertiti may have shared with a humble scribe wasn't just scandalous, it was revolutionary. It's after midnight when you find yourself creeping along a corridor most people pretend doesn't exist. No torches light the way, no guards are stationed here. That's not because it's unimportant, it's because it's too important, or too dangerous, or maybe both. These are those back passages behind the royal harem, the part of the palace where whispers outnumber footsteps, where perfume masks secrets, and where the line between pleasure and peril is so thin it barely exists. You're following the faint sound of sandals soft against polished stone. A servant girl, maybe 15, maybe 20, you can't tell in the low light, is moving like someone who's done this before. She glides past a half-open lattice window, a sheer scarf tied over her face, not for modesty, for stealth. You've heard her name only once, Iset Nefret. Not a noble, not an official concubine. Just one of many girls brought to the palace from border villages, trained in song, scent, dance, and silence. But tonight she isn't headed to one of the pleasure chambers. She's climbing the back stairs toward the private wing of a royal prince. And yeah, that's very, very illegal. Even within the harem, Egypt's not-so-secret palace of sensual politics, rules are enforced with frightening precision. Women are ranked by bloodline, dowry, and how much influence they bring to the pharaoh's bed. Every movement is monitored. Every accidental meeting with royalty is usually arranged and approved by at least 3 layers of palace bureaucracy. So what Iset Nefret is doing? This is more than a breach of etiquette. It's treason, wrapped in suckle silk. You keep your distance as she disappears into the prince's quarters. You don't know which one she's visiting. Could be Khem-Waset, the scholarly son with a fascination for the dead. Or perhaps Merneptah, the heir, stone-faced and twice her age. Either way, when that door closes behind her, she's gambling with her life. And she's not the only one. The harem is not just a place for entertainment. It's a minefield of alliances, feuds, ambition, and sabotage. Every smile hides a motive. Every gift contains a message. If word spreads that a lower-ranked girl is meeting with royalty unsanctioned, the fallout could be brutal. The senior wives won't tolerate a threat. The eunuchs are spies. And the chief harem mistress? She could rival a cobra in both patience and lethality. You settle into a small alcove near a water basin, trying not to breathe too loudly. An hour passes, then 2. Finally, Iset Nefret emerges. Her veil is damp, clutched in her fist. Her expression is unreadable, somewhere between triumph and terror. She pauses just long enough to check that the corridor is empty. Well, mostly. Then melts back into the shadows, her bare feet silent against the stone. Days pass, then a week. You start to hear murmurs. The prince is ill, refusing food, distracted in council. He cancels meetings with his tutors. One of the harem supervisors is dismissed. No explanation. Another girl is found weeping in the garden, holding a broken necklace. Something is brewing. Then the high priest pays a visit to the harem. That never happens, which means whatever happened behind that door wasn't just an affair, it was something else. Something potentially divine, or politically explosive. Here's where the historians lose the trail. There's no record of Iset Nefret beyond this moment. No punishment documented. No exile, no execution. Some believe she was quietly removed. Others claim she was elevated, hidden in a different palace under a false identity, possibly even married off to an Obtubulo to keep her mouth shut. But there's a single strange clue found decades ago. A ceramic oil jar discovered in a collapsed storage room at Pyrameses. It bears an inscription in casual hieratic script, almost like a note. It reads, "To the only one who saw me, not as property, but as storm." It's unsigned, but nearby archaeologists found a hair comb with an ivory inlay. The symbol carved into it? A cluster of lotus flowers, 3 blossoms bending toward a central bud. A common harem motif, yes, but also, if you're feeling poetic, a secret secret. Scholars disagree on the significance of the whole episode. Some argue that harem affairs were probably more common than we think, just rarely recorded. Others insist that Iset Nefret's story is an example of the hidden female agency within the rigid power structures of ancient Egypt. But then there are those who take the fringe view, that she may have influenced political decisions during the prince's illness, that her presence, brief, illicit, and undocumented, altered the course of a future pharaoh's rule. You walk the harem halls again later, long after the scandal has faded. The scent of frankincense still clings to the air. The cushions are plumped, the golden trays polished. It all looks the same on the surface, but beneath the silken song lies a system designed to suffocate anything real. And sometimes, despite everything, a single girl finds a way to breathe in it anyway. She wasn't supposed to have a voice, wasn't supposed to have a choice, but for one night, Iset Nefret chose, and someone, somewhere, never forgot her. You're standing at the edge of the Nile, its muddy banks breathing steam into the early morning air. The city's barely awake, and already there's a crowd. Not a festival crowd, a grim, silent one. Everyone's staring at the same thing, a body floating face down near the reeds, bloated, bruised, partially covered with lotus blossoms that drift like some cruel ceremonial shroud. But no priests are chanting, no family is mourning, because no one is supposed to know who it is. You do, though. It's Akenatan. He was a scribe, technically. A lesser noble, academically gifted, unremarkable to most, but not to Queen Tia. You remember the first time you saw them together, brushing hands near the pomegranate orchard like 2 schoolchildren. She'd dropped a scroll, and he'd picked it up, holding her gaze for 1 beat too long. That's how it always starts. Tia, the great royal wife of Amenhotep III, wasn't just some decorative figure draped in gold. She was smart, persuasive, feared even, foreign-born, maybe Nubian, definitely unconventional. She advised her husband openly, signed treaties, corresponded with foreign kings. She was no shrinking violet. And Akenatan, he wasn't just some boy with a nice jawline and soft hands. He was bold, brilliant, the kind of man who looked at the queen and didn't flinch, which of course made him a problem. Their affair wasn't exactly private. Not to you, not to the kitchen staff, not to the palace musicians who suddenly found themselves playing slower, softer songs whenever Tia happened to be reading alone in the side hall. The guards were paid to look away. The scribes knew better than to ask questions. Everyone understood the dance. Pharaoh had his own distractions, concubines by the dozen, a disinterest in details. But even in his indifference, a line still existed, and Akenatan crossed it. You overheard the warning weeks ago, an older eunuch whispering to him during a banquet, face pale as honey wine. Walk away while you still have legs to walk on. Akenatan smiled, the kind of smile that belongs to a man who thinks he's invincible, because a queen looks at him like he's fire and breath at once. But this is Egypt, and Egypt remembers everything. Tia tried to protect him, you think? You remember the shift in her expression. The longer hours in the palace temple, the sudden removal of certain guards from her wing. Her quiet discussions with the high priest of Ptah, always under the guise of religion, but always about something else. Maybe she thought her influence could cover for him, or maybe she hoped her status as queen would make her untouchable. Spoiler, it didn't. The day he disappeared, no one spoke his name. He simply stopped showing up. His quarters were swept clean, his name chiselled off one communal tablet. The official explanation? Reassigned to a temple school near Elephantine. Temporary, of course. He'd be back. But now you're looking at his body, pulled from the river like discarded fruit. His neck bears bruises shaped like a rope. There's a gash above one eyebrow. Someone made a show of it. No accident, no mercy, just a message. You glance around, but TA is nowhere in sight. That's not her style. When she grieves, it's done behind the scenes. Quiet, calculated. Later, you'll hear she's ordered the construction of a small shrine along a lesser canal, no name, no likeness, just a symbol etched deep into the stone. A falcon flying downward, wings half folded. A sign of loss, a secret eulogy. And here's where things get uncomfortably fascinating. There's no evidence she was punished. No exile, no disgrace. She remained queen. Even after Amenhotep's death, she retained power under her son Akenatan. She attended diplomatic meetings, wrote letters, still feared, still respected. Some think it's because she struck a deal, gave up Hekanakht in exchange for her position. Maybe she chose survival over love. Others argue she didn't choose at all, that the priests or the viziers, or even Pharaoh himself, took care of the distraction without ever consulting her. That this was a message to her as much as it was to him. There's a popular fringe theory, a romantic one, that says Hekanakht's death wasn't the end. That TA kept pieces of his writing in a hidden archive, perhaps buried beneath the palace library. That she visited his shrine every moonless night for years. The proof? A single inscription found in a discarded tomb near the workers' village. It reads, "I carried your words longer than my crown." Probably apocryphal, probably not her hand, but maybe. You return to the river days later when the crowds have moved on and the reeds sway softly again. The water's calm like nothing happened. Egypt has a way of absorbing pain into its soil, letting the dust seal it in. But you know better. In a palace obsessed with immortality, love is still the one thing that can get you killed fastest. TA ruled for decades. Her son transformed Egypt's religion. Her family's dynasty lasted longer than most. But the one story she never got to control, the one that never made it to the official murals, was the night a man she loved died, with her name on his lips and a rope around his neck. The air inside the royal banquet hall is thick with incense and the low hum of stringed instruments. Rose petals scatter across the polished floor like soft confetti, and laughter floats lazily among columns gilded in gold. A prince sits reclined on a lion-legged couch, one hand cradling a goblet of pomegranate wine, the other trailing idly over the silk hem of a dancer's sash. He's young, barely out of boyhood, but already bloated with entitlement. And the woman dancing for him? She's about to change history, not with a dagger or a crown, but with her hips. You lean against a pillar, trying not to be obvious. Everyone's watching her, and it's no wonder. She moves like the Nile, slow, deep, unpredictable. Her name is Setapenra, and she's not just another harem girl trained to be pleasing. She's something else, something dangerous. Her body tells stories the priests wouldn't dare speak aloud. Her eyes lock with the prince's, and in that moment it's not a performance anymore. It's a promise. He grins, foolish, hungry, unaware that the room is watching him fall out of power before he ever truly held it. You've heard the stories. Setapenra isn't from any noble house. She was born to fishermen, brought in during the last recruitment from the Delta, too low-born to matter, too talented to ignore. Her elevation from novice to favourite took weeks, not years. There are rumours the chief eunuch had to bribe 3 tutors just to keep her under control. There are rumours she taught herself hieroglyphs just to read the love poetry Pharaoh hides behind temple scrolls. But the biggest rumour, she's not content to be admired, she wants to be remembered, and she's chosen her mark. The prince, let's call him Horem, has no idea what's coming. He's a mid-tier royal, unlikely to inherit the throne, but still powerful enough to command respect and foolish enough to be led by the scent of jasmine oil and a meaningful glance. He invites her to dine at his table, which breaks at least 3 protocols and shatters 5 unspoken rules. Seta-Penra doesn't just accept. She corrects the way his cup is placed and asks the musicians to change the song. A sharp intake of breath travels through the room, a dancer correcting a prince. But Horem just laughs, flushed and dazed. She sits, the hall continues. Uneasy now, some pretend not to notice. Others, especially the wives of higher-ranking officials, whisper behind painted nails. That's the moment you know she's won. Within weeks, Seta-Penra is no longer performing. She's moved into a private chamber in the prince's wing. He commissions a necklace for her, gold with the 7 lapis scarabs, and asks for a mural to be painted of her likeness in his private bathhouse. Unheard of, disgraceful, but he doesn't care. He starts missing council meetings, leaves diplomatic scrolls unanswered. He's skipping temple rites, and worse, he's quoting her in arguments with his advisors. You hear it from a chamberlain first. He says Seta-Penra believes the gods favour those who make their own fate. And that's when the palace starts to panic. There's a quiet intervention. A priest of Thoth visits the prince. He's reminded of his duties, of the expectations that come with his lineage, of the danger in elevating someone who has no name, no bloodline, and no political value. For a few days, Horem seems to retreat. The dancer vanishes from public view. But then, another feast, and this time Seta-Penra is seated before the wives of minor nobles. The court doesn't just see that as an insult, they see it as war. The story ends where these stories usually do, with poison, tears, and a sudden change of policy. One night, Horem collapses during a hunting trip. The royal doctors say it was heat stroke. His steward says it was the wine, but the rumour that spreads faster than either? Seta-Penra poisoned him. Or worse, loved him. It doesn't matter which is true, the damage is done. She's seized by guards before sunrise, her chambers stripped. The mural in the bathhouse chipped off within hours. Her necklace, that extravagant gift, goes missing. Some say it was melted down. Others believe it ended up buried in a ceremonial pit outside Memphis. Cursed, wrapped in linen, entombed like a relic too dangerous for the living. But here's where things get truly weird. There's a fragment of poetry attributed to an unknown court singer that was found centuries later behind a collapsed wall. It reads, "She danced not for love, nor coin, but to draw the eyes of fate. She bled no man, yet still they fell. She asked for nothing, but left with the stars behind her." No name, no signature, but the timing matches. Some fringe historians believe Seta-Penra didn't die, that she was smuggled out by a merchant whose son she once healed with herbs, that she travelled south through Nubia and lived out her days as a healer, eventually becoming a local legend known as the river's voice. Others are less kind. They say she was executed quietly, thrown into the Nile so the water would erase her. Either way, you never see her again. But her ghost lingers, in the way court dancers pause before taking a step, in the way every new concubine is now vetted by 5 separate officials, in the faint burn mark where her mural once was. She didn't need to be queen, she only needed a moment. And in that moment, she burned through the heart of a prince and rewrote the rules for every woman who had come after her. You're standing in the shade of a half-constructed obelisk, the dry wind swirling chalky dust through the air like powdered bone. The workers nearby glance at you, their eyes ringed with sweat and suspicion. As if they know you don't belong, and you don't, not here, not now, because what you're about to witness isn't an ordinary building project. Is the birthplace of a scandal, quiet, hidden, but sharp enough to cut through royal stone. This obelisk is meant to honour the gods, but right now, it's the backdrop to one of the most forbidden love stories in Egyptian history. The architect arrives just after midday, wrapped in linen, scrolls tucked under one arm. His name is Amenemhat, and he's no ordinary builder. He's a visionary, young, confident, brilliant in that way that makes older men twitch with jealousy. Pharaoh trusts him, maybe even admires him. That alone should have been enough. But then came her, Queen Mutemwia, wife of Pharaoh Thutmose IV, mother of a future god king, regal, measured, revered by both priests and court. And yet, as you watch her approach Amenemhat near the scaffolding, she doesn't move like a queen. She moves like a woman who's just remembered she has a pulse. They meet in the half-shadow of a column just out of earshot, but the language is clear enough. A touch on the arm, a shared glance that lingers too long. You've been around enough to know the rhythm of secret desire. And this isn't a fling. This is dangerous, mutual, intentional. You find out later they first met during a night inspection of temple renovations. He'd been summoned to explain a structural flaw in the southern wing. She'd asked a question, he'd corrected her. Not rudely, but boldly. That's the kind of spark that doesn't go unnoticed. Over the weeks that followed, she requested his presence more and more, under the guise of approving plans, inspecting sketches, discussing stone sources. But the truth was simpler. She liked how he spoke to her, not as a goddess, not as an ornament, but as a mind. And Amenemhat? He wasn't stupid. He knew the line he was walking, knew that kings don't take kindly to anyone, even architects stealing glances at their queens. But the thing about brilliance is that it often comes with arrogance. He believed he could outmaneuver the system. For a while he did. You overhear a servant murmuring that the queen has been sending him folded papyri, sketches of flowers with subtle changes drawn in, like visual codes. One blossom opened, one closed, a language no one else could read. You catch another whisper that he's hidden her personal seal inside a hollowed-out chisel handle. And maybe the most outrageous? That part of the temple's new reliefs, those winding patterns of lotus and papyrus, were inspired not by the gods but by her silhouette. It's subtle. You wouldn't notice it unless you were looking. But once you do, it's impossible to unsee. And then comes the turning point. One evening, Amenemhat's sketchbook goes missing. Not just any sketches, those sketches. Intimate outlines of the queen's face, perhaps a shoulder, perhaps more. Nothing graphic, but too personal, too specific. The kind of drawings that don't belong in an architect's archive, especially not one shared with the royal scribes. You don't know who found them. Maybe a jealous rival, maybe a careless servant. Doesn't matter. The alarm spreads like wildfire. The scrolls are confiscated. Amenemhat is summoned. And Queen Mutemwia? She disappears from public life for nearly 2 months. The official version: illness, exhaustion, sacred retreat. But you catch sight of her one afternoon in the palace garden, face pale, posture rigid. Not broken, but not unmarked either. Amenemhat vanishes from the court. No trial, no fanfare, just gone. His family is stripped of title. His name is scratched from temple records. But you're told, quietly, by a stonecutter who used to assist him, that he wasn't executed. He was exiled, sent to a border town near Nubia to build grain silos, of all things. A fall from grace so brutal it might as well have been a funeral. But here's the twist. 2 years later, a small chapel is commissioned in that same town. Nothing grand, just a modest stone structure near the river. It bears no royal names. But the inner wall shows a woman and a man seated side by side, hands almost touching. The figures are deliberately vague. No crowns, no titles. But the woman's headdress is unmistakable, an echo of Mutemwia's earliest portraits. Fringe theorists jump on this, of course. Some believe the queen arranged it in secret, that she funneled money through temple accounts to support him. Others argue that she visited him there once under disguise, that a child was born of their affair and hidden among the temple novices. There's no hard evidence, just suggestions. A comb carved in her personal style found in a worker's home near the chapel. A single gold ring engineered with a spiral pattern matching her signature amulet. A rumour that the pharaoh himself ordered the chapel to remain untouched, out of guilt, out of respect, or simply to forget. But what really haunts you is the memory of that sketch, the curve of her neck, the softness in his lines. It wasn't lust, it was devotion. And for all of Egypt's rigid power structures, that kind of love, quiet, impossible, doomed, left its fingerprints in the stone, where even centuries of silence can't quite erase it. It's late afternoon, and you're tucked inside a forgotten corner of the palace archives, the scent of dry papyrus and candle wax clinging to every inch of air. You've bribed a sleepy scribe with a honey cake and a promise not to mention his gambling debts. He's let you into the restricted wing, the one with the hedil and no formal inventory. This is where the scrolls go when the court wants to pretend they don't exist. Gossip sealed in ink, history's leftovers, and tonight you find something no one was meant to read. A diary, or fragments of one, torn, stained, incomplete. The handwriting is uneven, rushed in places, and elegant in others. A royal hand, a young one. As the pages unfold, so does a voice, conflicted, lonely, vulnerable in a way that makes your skin prickle. The author is the son of a pharaoh, not the heir, though. A second son, maybe third, his name is never written in full, but the context points to someone during the reign of Seti I, possibly a younger brother of Ramses the Great. And the subject of his words? A man. The entries begin innocently enough. Observations about court life, temple politics, falconry accidents. But slowly something more intimate creeps in. Mentions of a scribe with sea-glass eyes, of the way his voice makes the copper bells seem flat. Soon you're reading about shared glances across a torchlit chamber, a chess match that turned into a hand held too long, an embrace in the shadow of a festival procession. Then a line that stops you cold. He kissed me once between prayers. I forgot the names of the gods. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not for a prince, and definitely not with another man. In Egypt, love between men wasn't criminal the way it was in other ancient cultures, but there were limits. Gender roles were rigid. A royal engaging in an affair with someone of equal or lower status, regardless of gender, was political suicide. The prince's role wasn't just ceremonial. He was a symbol of future power. His behavior was supposed to reinforce cosmic order, not unravel it behind closed doors. But that's exactly what happens. You read entry after entry tracing the prince's descent into obsession. He speaks of dreams where the gods punish him with silence. He describes a night where he tried to end the relationship, only to return to the scribe's chamber before the moon had reached its peak. He writes, "I would rather risk my name than forget his touch." There's pain in every line, not melodrama, just quiet, unbearable longing, the kind that festers under gold and hierarchy. Then things escalate. The scribe, whom he names only as Keku, is caught trying to leave the palace with a sealed letter. Not just any letter. One bearing the prince's private seal. The contents are never revealed, but it's enough to trigger a scandal. Keku's arrested. The prince's next entry is jagged, ink blotted with what might be tears or blood. He writes that he begged his father for mercy, that he offered to take the punishment himself, that he told the truth, all of it. And then, silence. The diary ends abruptly, half a page ripped in haste. No farewell, no epilogue, just a smudge of ink and a faint crescent mark where the seal used to be. You sit there in the candlelight, stunned. The air feels heavier now, like the walls remember too. There's no official record of this prince in the royal annals, no mention of disgrace, no public trial. But if you dig deep, very deep, you'll find one inscription, deep inside the tomb of a mid-ranking scribe buried outside Abydos, a minor man by all accounts. But his tomb is unusually decorated. It contains a scene of two men standing face to face, hands joined in a pose traditionally reserved for married couples, offering prayers to Osiris. Their names are deliberately scratched out, but the carving remains. Some Egyptologists argue the tomb was defaced later during a religious crackdown. Others suggest it was the work of jealous family members, and the more skeptical voices, they claim the scene has been misinterpreted entirely, that it simply depicts a teacher and student, right, because teachers often hold hands and offer their hearts to the god of the afterlife. The fringe theorists are bolder. They believe the prince faked his death, renounced his title, and joined Keku in exile. That the diary was hidden intentionally to preserve their story in a place where the gods couldn't erase it. One even claims the tomb's layout mimics the prince's childhood chambers, a secret architectural confession etched in stone. You'll never know for sure, but as you leave the archive, the last line of the diary echoes in your mind. I was born of Ra's blood, but I die as his son, twice blessed, once for truth and once for love. It's the kind of heartbreak history tries to drown beneath layers of granite and protocol. But sometimes the cracks in the walls are wide enough for love to whisper through. The sun hangs low over the white limestone cliffs of Deir el-Bahari, casting long golden shadows across the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut. You stand at the edge of a columned terrace, looking down at the valley below, where priests, officials and servants move like ants between shrines. Somewhere far beneath your feet, in a hidden chamber long sealed from the world, lies a sarcophagus carved with a name once nearly lost to time. Senenmut, the queen's architect, her steward, her tutor, her something more. You've heard the rumours, everyone has. Senenmut was a commoner by birth, a man who should have ended up stacking papyri in some dusty temple archive. But instead he rose faster than any man of his status in Egypt's memory. Appointed tutor to Hatshepsut's daughter, given control over vast estates, royal projects, and temple operations, entrusted with sacred rites, even granted a tomb, two actually, near the Valley of the Kings, one of them suspiciously close to hers. People whispered, still whisper. Was he just her advisor, or something else entirely? You step into one of the inner chambers of the temple and stare up at a ceiling fresco still faintly painted with stars. Hidden near a corner, half faded, is a carving of a man kneeling beside a queen, their hands not touching but reaching, almost brushing. The woman's face is clearly Hatshepsut. The man's Senamut. The detail is careful, intimate, too personal to be part of the official record. Not placed on display, not meant for public adoration. But here it is, buried in the background, like a whisper carved into stone. The story goes something like this. When Hatshepsut was thrust into power after her husband's death, she was expected to serve as regent until her stepson Thutmose III came of age. But Hatshepsut didn't step aside. She took the throne, declared herself pharaoh, put on the ceremonial beard and the royal kilt, became king in everything but biology, and Senamut was there for every step of that transformation. He didn't just build temples, he built her image, crafted her mythology, helped reframe her reign not as an aberration, but as destiny. Some even say he helped rewrite religious texts to support her divine right to rule. You don't get that close to power without touching it. But here's where the speculation gets sticky. Senenmut's tomb, his secret one, the one not meant for public view, includes a star map painted directly on the ceiling, a private celestial chart. But among the constellations, two figures appear not as gods or symbolic animals, but as human forms, one male, one female, standing together, hands joined facing the east. Again, no names, no titles, just the image. Archaeologists debate what it means. Was it a romantic gesture, symbolic partnership, a veiled confession? Some say yes, some scoff, but all agree the placement was intentional. Now for the fringe detail that really turns heads. Buried deep in the ruins of a smaller shrine nearby, someone found a small limestone statue, barely a foot tall, worn with age, a seated couple, both dressed in formal robes, but with one curious detail. The woman's face is carved with Hatshepsut's traditional regalia, and the man is holding her hand. It's not labelled. And when it was discovered, the find was quietly tucked away in the archives of the Luxor Museum for further study. You don't tuck away innocent statues for further study, you bury evidence of a scandal. Because here's the thing, Egypt's system of divine kingship was delicate. A female pharaoh was already controversial. A female pharaoh with a common lover? That would have shattered the illusion of divinity, undermined the carefully constructed myth of her God-given rule. So naturally, history tried to bury it. There's no record of Senenmut being punished exactly. But his name slowly disappears from inscription. His honours stop increasing. His second tomb, fully carved, beautifully painted, is never used. His mummy is never found. It's as if after decades of loyal service he simply evaporated. Some claim he was exiled. Others suggest he chose to vanish rather than risk compromising Hatshepsut's legitimacy. A few romantics believe he and the queen made an impossible choice, separation in life to preserve the dream of her reign. And then there's the most speculative theory of all, that Senenmut did die near the end of her rule, and Hatshepsut, overcome by grief, ordered his burial in a secret chamber beneath her own temple. No markers, no ceremony, just the man she trusted more than anyone else, laid to rest as close to her as politics would allow. There has never been proof, but a few years ago, ground-penetrating radar revealed something strange beneath the upper terrace of Deir el-Bahari, a narrow, uncharted cavity deep in the bedrock, sealed and untouched. Excavation was halted due to structural concerns, but it's there, waiting. Maybe it's a forgotten storeroom, maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's the last hiding place of a love so dangerous it had to be entombed in silence. You step back into the daylight, blinking against the glare. The columns rise around you like guardians. Hatshepsut's face watches from every wall, serene, commanding, eternal. A pharaoh remembered as bold, brilliant, divine. But maybe, beneath all that marble and myth, there was a woman who dared to love someone not because he was royal or kill, but because he saw her before she became a statue. There's a passage in the Valley of the Kings that no map includes. No tour guide points to it. It's not sealed by gold or guarded by statues, just a rough seam in the rock covered by centuries of sand and denial. And tonight, under the weak light of your oil lamp, you duck into it. The air is dry, stale, undisturbed. The silence here isn't peaceful, it's watchful, like the walls remember everything and have been waiting up to be heard. The tunnel is narrow, the incline gentle but persistent, and just when your legs start to ache, you see it. A chamber, unfinished, crude in places, but unmistakably intentional. You step into it slowly, dust crunching beneath your sandals, and there on the far wall, half erased by time but still visible, is something that should not exist. 2 figures, one is royal. A pharaoh, unmistakably so. You can tell by the headdress, the uraeus, the stance. The other, no crown, or no beard, smaller but not kneeling, standing beside the king, not behind. Their hands touch, not quite holding, but not far off. The figures face forward, united, equal. You wipe at the stone and feel the shiver rise in your spine. This wasn't carved for public eyes. This was private, a secret memorial. You're in the tomb of the lover who was never supposed to be remembered. Historians have long argued about the mystery of KV-32B, a secondary shaft discovered in the late 19th century, then promptly ignored. It was dismissed as a collapsed work tunnel, its interior choked with rubble and debris. But fragments found nearby, pottery shards with floral motifs, a broken mirror, bead necklace carved in the shape of 2 interlocking falcons, hinted at something more. Something emotional, something personal. The leading theory? This was the hidden burial site of a forbidden consort. The debate, of course, is about whose. Some believe it belonged to a low-ranking priest who had a secret affair with Pharaoh Siptah. Others claim it was the final resting place of male lover of Tutankhamun, possibly a guard or attendant. But the most intriguing theory, and the one that no official record dares confirm, is that this tomb belonged to a woman who defied every structure Egypt had put in place. A royal concubine, perhaps, or a foreigner with no dowry, who somehow won the heart of the king and lost everything else. The walls tell fragments of her story. You run your fingers along the left panel, where a cluster of painted hieroglyphs forms a poem, not a prayer but a confession. Loosely translated, to be known by the gods is nothing. To be known by you is everything. The paint is faded, the script hurried. It's not a professional scribe's hand. It's personal, urgent, desperate even. On the other wall you find the outline of a woman's face carved with a tenderness that temple art rarely allows. Her eyes are closed, her lips parted as if mid-breath, and beneath her a line of text chiseled in smaller glyphs. I buried you beneath my name, so you might live even if I do not. Who wrote it? No one knows for certain. But some suspect the king himself. Which king? That's where things fall apart. What's strange is how little is actually said about the figure who shares this tomb. There's no full name, no list of titles, just small details. A bracelet here, a hairpin there, the faint outline of a servant's headdress beside a royal collar. Like the tomb was meant to both remember and erase her, as though the builder couldn't bear to forget her, but also couldn't risk the world remembering. You hear stories about tomb robbers who refuse to enter this one, about strange symbols found at the entrance, protection spells maybe, or warnings. Some say the tomb is cursed, but not in the theatrical mummy's revenge kind of way. A deeper curse, the kind that comes from love denied the dignity of memory. And here's the academic debate that won't die. Did the pharaoh intend to bury her here? Some scholars argue that the tomb was meant for the lover and only abandoned when the affair was discovered. Others think it was dug in secret, possibly by the pharaoh's inner circle, perhaps even by the lover herself, and left hidden to protect both of them. One fringe historian suggests that the tomb's alignment with the winter solstice allows a single shaft of sunlight to touch the carved hands of the 2 figures for exactly 3 minutes each year. A final touch, a parting kiss, baked into stone. It sounds romantic, probably too romantic, but when you're standing here, looking at the walls, breathing the dry, bitter air, it doesn't feel like a theory. It feels like truth that everyone's been too afraid to say out loud. As you turn to leave, your lamp flickers. The silence deepens. You imagine the person buried here, whoever they were, lying alone, unmarked, without ceremony, not mourned in public, not immortalized in statues, just hidden away, remembered only by the man who loved them, and now by you. Egypt was a civilization obsessed with memory, with permanence, but even here, love could be deemed too dangerous to remember, and yet somehow, impossibly, it remembers itself anyway. The first time you see them together, it's not in a palace or temple or marble-tiled hall. It's on a dusty balcony overlooking a marketplace. Two figures silhouetted by the sinking sun, laughing over something mundane, probably nothing, but that's how it always begins, isn't it? With nothing. A shared smile, a joke you weren't meant to hear, two people leaning slightly too close for it to be casual. You recognize her immediately, of course. That profile is carved into coins and mosaics and temple walls across a dozen empires. Cleopatra VII, Queen of Egypt, the last pharaoh. But the man beside her? He's not Caesar, not yet Mark Antony. This is someone else entirely, someone erased. His name has been lost, be swallowed up by Roman narratives and political rewrites. But for a brief, intoxicating moment before Egypt's final descent into Roman control, Cleopatra loved someone who didn't make it into the official biographies. A rebel, a soldier, a nobody by royal standards. Let's rewind. Before Caesar entered the picture, before the warships and the asp and the endless retellings of her death, Cleopatra was a young queen struggling to survive in a palace full of backstabbers, spies and siblings with too much ambition. Her reign began in chaos. Her co-ruler, her teenage brother, wanted her gone. The court was split. The Romans were circling like hawks. She was 21, brilliant, multilinguistic, politically feral, and alone. Except, apparently for him, there's a papyrus fragment discovered in the Fayum Basin decades ago. Now locked in a climate-controlled vault in Alexandria, half-burned, barely legible. But on it is a verse, possibly written in Cleopatra's own hand, addressed to someone named Nepus. Some scholars think it was a code name, others believe it was real. The writing is raw, unlike anything from her polished decrees. You smiled without fear in the lion's den, and I loved you for it. So who was this Nabus? The strongest theory suggests he was a mercenary from the eastern provinces. Syrian or Persian, maybe. Recruited to guard Cleopatra during her exile, when she fled Alexandria after being ousted by her brother's faction. He was reportedly loyal, clever, and, according to one Roman account, unreasonably insolent for his station, which is how you know she adored him. One late account, written centuries later by a Coptic monk, claims Cleopatra snuck out of her desert villa at night dressed as a handmaiden to meet him beneath the date palms, that she gave him a ring engraved with a serpent eating its own tail, symbolizing eternity, that she once risked being caught by a Roman scouting party just to spend an extra hour with him. Of course, the official histories leave him out entirely. No statues, no tomb, no title, which tells you everything, because for Cleopatra every relationship was a political weapon. With Caesar it was strategy, with Antony alliance, but with Nabus there was no reason, no gain, just danger, which means it was real. That's exactly why it had to be buried. Eventually the pressure of power returned. She was summoned back to Alexandria. Caesar arrived. The game changed. If Nabus was still in her life then, he was smart enough to step back. Or maybe not smart enough, because the story ends, as these always do, with a disappearance. A single Egyptian account mentions a foreign soldier arrested for seditious proximity to the queen's quarters. No name, no trial, just a notation, then nothing. But Cleopatra, meticulous as she was, may have left a clue. In the central shrine of her temple to Isis at Philae, behind a relief of the goddess standing between twin serpents, there's an inscription. One line, written in demotic script, low to the ground where only someone crawling would see it. It says, "I fed you honey in the dark." No context, no explanation. But if you'd ever read the love poetry of that era, you'd know that's not metaphor. That's memory. Sensory, physical, aching. Some modern scholars call it apocryphal. They argue Cleopatra wouldn't risk a scandal so early in her reign, but others insist the absence of evidence is the evidence. She was too smart to let anything survive, except maybe that one line, hidden low on a temple wall like a love note left in the dust. There's even a whispered theory that she bore a child before Caesarion, not officially acknowledged, not royal enough to name, a boy raised in secrecy, trained as a priest or soldier, kept just far enough from the line of succession to avoid threat. There's no solid proof, just a funerary stele found in Thebes with an oddly phrased dedication, born of the two lands, cradled by the hidden one. Interpret that how you like. You leave the balcony, the sun slipping beneath the rooftops of Alexandria, like a coin falling into water. In the distance the harbour flickers with torchlight. The past always flickers, doesn't it? In and out, light and shadow, Cleopatra remains a symbol of power, seduction, strategy. But even symbols have hearts. Before the Romans, before the glory, before the ruin, she loved someone whose name the world forgot, and she never once spoke of him again. The temple smells of rosewater and candle smoke, a soft haze curling around the columns like incense-wrapped secrets. You've come in just after the evening ceremony, when the last echoes of chanting fade into the stone and the gods, allegedly, retreat to their celestial palaces. But something still lingers here, something warm, something mortal. You slip quietly behind a veil of hanging linen and find them, two silhouettes in the inner sanctum of Hathor's shrine, just a breath apart. A priestess, and a palace guard, and the look between them says everything the rituals try to silence. The priestess's name is Dendera, like the city. Fitting, since this temple is her life. She was dedicated to Hathor at birth, groomed for the gods, raised in purity, forbidden to marry, to bear children, to let her heart stray from the divine. Her vows are carved in limestone and signed in bloodless ink. She's not a woman, not exactly. She's a vessel, a symbol, but right now, she's very, very human. And the man, he's Neferhotep. Bronze armor, a lion's mane of curls, and a reputation for being inconveniently observant. He's the one they send to guard sacred spaces because he knows his place. But lately it's become clear that Neferhotep doesn't stay in his place, especially not when Dendera is near. You watch them from behind a lattice window, hidden in the stillness. She speaks first, something about the moon, the changing tides, maybe nothing at all. But her voice is different now, softer, less formal, like she's allowed herself one moment of unscripted honesty. And Neferhotep listens the way only someone in love does, with his entire body, every nod, every breath, an offering. This isn't the first time. There's a rhythm to their meeting. After ceremonies, before dawn, in sacred spaces where only the initiated may enter, and only silence is allowed. Their affair is more than scandalous, it's sacrilege. Priestesses of Hathor vow themselves not just to celibacy, but to emotional detachment, to serve the goddess of love while being denied love themselves. The irony is not lost on anyone, least of all Dendera. The risk is enormous. If they're caught, she could be stripped of her station, exiled, possibly even mutilated, her tongue cut as one ancient penalty for breaking sacred vows. And him, executed. No trial, no stone-carved forgiveness, just silence. The kind Egypt excels at. But still, they meet. You later find a hidden cache of palm fibre scrolls tucked behind a cracked wall in a long-abandoned storeroom, fragments of poems, unsigned, written in ink mixed with wine. They aren't official, they aren't polished, they're raw. One reads, "I bathe in milk to erase the scent of him, but still he clings to my ribs like breath." Not exactly the kind of thing you'd expect from someone who's supposed to spend her life channeling divinity. Here's where the scholars start to fight. Some believe Dendera was never a priestess at all, but a noblewoman who briefly served in temple ceremonies before returning to court life. Others insist she was high-ranking, possibly even a chantress of Hathor, an elite role given only to those with royal connections. The more fringe theory, that she and Neferhotep weren't just lovers, but conspirators. One fragment of a court record, badly damaged and likely censored, mentions the sudden disappearance of 3 temple officials during the reign of Seti. The implication is that something happened at Dendera's temple. A ritual gone wrong? A scandal buried under offerings and marble? Theories abound. But here's the most bizarre part. During recent excavations, archaeologists discovered a hidden alcove beneath the main sanctuary. Inside, a single unmarked limestone coffin. Small, intact, no inscriptions, no amulets. Just one object resting on top, a bronze armband etched with the feather of Maat, and beneath it, carved directly into the stone, she chose balance over silence. Who was she? No one knows for sure, but nearby a broken wall relief shows a priestess and a soldier, arms intertwined, not in combat, but in embrace. The faces are chiseled away, deliberately, but the outline remains. Some say Dendera was discovered, punished and buried quietly by sympathetic hands. Others believe she fled, abandoning her vows, vanishing into the southern villages where she lived out her days as a healer. One legend says she and Neferhotep were caught, but spared after a solar eclipse interrupted their sentencing, taken as a divine sign. No records confirm that, just a handful of verses, one ending with, "He asked for my soul, but I gave him my name." You return to the temple days later. A festival is in full swing. The priests parade a golden statue of Hathor through the streets, and incense thickens the air like fog. Everything is beautiful, ceremonial, empty, and yet, somewhere beneath the layers of perfume and protocol, you feel it. The echo of hands brushing in the dark, of vows whispered, then broken, of a love that bloomed in the unlikeliest place, beneath the goddess of love herself. It's a story too inconvenient to be remembered. So of course it never left. You're in the royal laundry court of all places, crouched behind a stack of linen still damp from the Nile rinse, listening to two women whisper like their lives depend on it. And honestly, they probably do. One is folding a tunic with such aggressive precision it's clear her nerves are unraveling. The other leans in, voice pitched so low it blends with the sound of water sloshing into jars. Their conversation shouldn't matter. There are just servants, just girls. But the name they keep repeating, the one they're too afraid to say loudly, makes your spine go cold. It's the name of a prince, a royal, newly born. And if these two are to be believed, born of her, not a queen, not a concubine, a servant. You knew something was off last week. The palace had gone oddly quiet. Not the silence of calm, but the kind that comes when people are too scared to speak. A high-ranking midwife was dismissed suddenly, 2 guards reassigned, and a cart full of cloth, stained red and still warm, was wheeled out before dawn. No one asked questions, no one ever does. But here in the steam and soap of the laundry court, the truth bubbles to the surface. A young maid, possibly a Kushite girl from the look of her features, is recovering in the back storeroom. She hasn't been seen for days. Her meals are delivered. Her name isn't spoken anymore. But one of these gossiping laundresses used to braid her hair, used to help her dress in the same threadbare tunic she wore when delivering water to the royal court. And now she's delivered something else entirely. A royal child, illegitimate, unacknowledged, unwelcome, except, maybe not. You sneak a look at a half-finished inventory scroll sitting nearby, pretending to examine a soap tally. Hidden between mundane items, garments, oil flasks, copper wash basins, is a notation you almost miss. Linen for room 23B, additional required for infant. There shouldn't be an infant in that wing. That wing belongs to the treasury officials, unless someone's hiding something. Now, let's rewind a little. The servant girl's name is Menat. She was brought into the palace during a recruitment sweep after a famine, chosen for her calm temperament and unusual beauty, according to a brittle logbook in the Chamberlain's files. She worked silently, mostly at night, mostly delivering water and messages, never above her station, never disruptive. Until one evening she was sent to the prince's chamber. The details are murky. Was it coercion? A fling? Was she flattered? Afraid? You don't know. What's clear is that something happened, more than once, and that months later her figure began to change, slowly at first under layers of linen. But soon, the whispers began, then the silences, then the protection, because she wasn't cast out, she was hidden. That's what's strange. Normally, the penalty for such an affair, especially one resulting in pregnancy, would be brutal. Public disgrace, whipping, worse. But Menat was quietly moved to a secure chamber near the granary courtyard. Midwives were brought in. She gave birth under a full moon. No announcements, no rituals, just a single oil lamp left burning in the window for 3 nights. The child, a boy, healthy, perfect. And if the gossip is right, born with a faint gold mark on his left shoulder, a patch of pigment shaped almost like the eye of Horus. The palace doctors called it a curiosity. The priests called it an omen. Here's where it gets weird. You dig through the record scrolls for royal births from that month. The Queen has no documented child born then, neither do any of the official consorts. But a shipment of toys, baby linens and amulets was approved under the Treasury seal the same week. Someone, somewhere, planned for this child. Someone expected him to survive, and someone wanted to make sure no one knew who his mother was. Theories explode from there. Some say the prince, his father, ordered her hidden, too ashamed to acknowledge the child, too afraid to kill him. Others believe the child was taken from Menat entirely, raised as an orphaned noble ward. A few more dramatic voices claim the boy grew up to be a future vizier, placed high in court without ever knowing his true parentage. But one fringe inscription fuels the most romantic version of the story. In a neglected noble's tomb near the edge of the desert, the walls are plain, barely decorated, not unusual for a low-ranking scribe. But on one slab, hidden behind a collapsed niche, is a carving of a woman holding a baby standing before a faceless man. Above them, a phrase, "He saw her not as clay, but as flame." No names, no titles, just that. Her scholars believe it was a metaphor. Others think it's literal. One daring theory suggests the tomb originally belonged to Menat, relocated to protect her identity. Her name doesn't appear in any court lists after the child's birth. She simply vanishes. Some say she died in childbirth, some say she lived in quiet exile. Her son brought to her in secret once a year, and some, always the fringe, say she was later buried beside her child, who rose high enough in court to demand it. You leave the laundry court with more questions than answers, the scent of soap and steam still clinging to your robes. Above you, the palace hums along as if nothing's happened. As if a girl didn't just break the line between servant and sovereign. As if a child wasn't born with no place in the world and too much meaning to be ignored. The scribes won't write Menat's name, but the linen women remember. And so does the stone. The sky is copper tonight. A bruised horizon smoulders above Thebes, and something in the air feels tight, like the gods have stopped breathing. You're standing near the granaries, where the wheat's supposed to be tall, golden, swaying in time with the river winds, but the fields are brittle, cracked, the harvest failed, again. The high priests say it's the flooding patterns, the moon cycles, the will of the Nile. But in the back alleys, in the dark corners of marketplaces, people mutter something else entirely. They say it's the pharaoh's fault, or more specifically, his bed's fault. Egyptians might have prayed to hundreds of gods, but they understood the bedroom was sacred. The pharaoh's fertility was Egypt's fertility. His health, his marriages, his choices, all of it reflected in the land. If the crops died, it meant someone somewhere had broken the divine pattern. And this year, all eyes point to him, to the affair. You first heard the rumour from a basket weaver outside the temple walls. Whispers of a woman, foreign, sharp-tongued, too young to know better, and too beautiful to be forgotten, who had bewitched the pharaoh, or a queen, not a priestess, a dancer from the Redlands, Libyan possibly. Her name, Tadu-Hepa, which means pure, although no one saying her name believes that anymore. Tadu-Hepa appeared in court just over a year ago, a gift, officially, sent by a desert tribe after a border skirmish. It was diplomacy wrapped in perfume and silk. She was expected to entertain, serve, disappear. She didn't. Within weeks, she was spotted walking alone through the palace gardens, a privilege even some royal wives weren't granted. She was seen sitting beside the pharaoh during evening prayers, her feet bare, her lips stained with pomegranate wine. When the official queen entered a room, she stood. When Tadu-Hepa entered, the pharaoh rose. That's when the temples started to panic. The high priest of Amun made a public offering of 7 white bulls, praying for clarity to return to the throne. It was a jab, cloaked in religious language. Meanwhile, sacrifices increased. Festivals were extended. Anything to please the gods while the land dried up and Tadu-Hepa's shadow stretched longer. Then the rains failed, and the whispers got louder. You start noticing the changes. Farmers begin leaving offerings not at the temples, but beneath the palace walls. Small bundles of wilted barley, burned pieces of cloth, clay figurines with broken arms, curses disguised as prayers. You hear a fishmonger call her the salt in the Nile. A priest blames her for the appearance of twin-tailed comets in the sky. A midwife claims 3 infants were stillborn after being born on the same day Tadu-Hepa entered the temple grounds. Superstition? Sure. But it's Egypt. Superstition is law in disguise. The pharaoh, to his credit, or foolishness, refuses to banish her. He doubles down. She's granted a private chamber near the royal chapel. Her garments are imported. Her name appears, briefly, in a dedication inscription at the feet of a statue of Hathor. Beloved of joy, it reads, and some scribe somewhere surely winced while carving it. But the breaking point isn't her influence, it's the garden. The royal garden, once lush and overflowing with sacred lotuses and sycamores, begins to wither. Not all at once, just enough to be noticed. The pool dries at the edges, birds nest elsewhere, The bees abandon the nectar troughs. A gardener claims he saw Tadu-Hepa walking barefoot across the soil where only queens are permitted to step, trailing fingers along the sacred hibiscus as she hummed in a language no one recognized. That's all the priests need to hear. An emergency council is held. Not officially, of course. No one wants to write down what's really being discussed. But the concern is clear. The balance has tipped. The gods are displeased. The drought, the stillbirths, the rotting fish on the riverbanks. It all points back to her, to them. Here's where the story forks. Some accounts claim Tadu-Hepa was accused of witchcraft and quietly imprisoned in the temple vaults. Others say she was exiled under cover of darkness, sent across the desert with nothing but a jug of water and a cursed necklace to ensure she never returned. But then there's the third version, the one buried in the footnotes of a half-destroyed ledger kept by a royal steward. It states simply, Lady Tadu-Hepa escorted to the inner sanctum by command of His Majesty. Rain followed 3 days later. If you believe this, and the steward wasn't known for poetic exaggeration, it suggests something else entirely, that she wasn't exiled or punished. She was sacrificed, not in blood, in silence. The theory goes that the pharaoh finally understood the weight of public opinion, the anger of the priests, the mounting fear across the land, and so he gave her up. Not publicly, not violently, he just gave her up, locked her away, ended the affair. And then it rained. The crops returned. The bees came back. The garden bloomed. The gods, allegedly, were satisfied. But one temple stone, partially buried near the banks of the Nile, still carries her name, faint, worn down, like a scar fading beneath the skin of the earth. It reads, "The one who was the joy of my heart, whose absence feeds the rain." You sit beneath the sycamore trees now, cool breeze brushing your face. The river sparkles again. The land lives. The people are fed. But somewhere in the quiet between prayers, the pharaoh dreams of her, and Egypt pretends it never knew her name. It's the day of a royal wedding, and the palace is humming like a beehive stuffed with incense. Gold sashes, harpists warming up in the garden, sweet pastries cooling on woven trays. It's all very ceremonial, very divine, very orchestrated, which is why it's hilarious that you're currently hiding behind a statue of the crocodile god Sobek, watching an assassin flirt with the bride. Technically, she's not a bride yet. She's still in the dressing chamber, robed in fine linen, her hands perfumed, her wrists trembling just slightly. But the man leaning against the doorway, joking with her slave girl, adjusting the strap of his sandals like he has all the time in the world, he's not on any guest list. Or rather, he is, but not for his charm. He's here to slit a throat. Possibly several. His name is Setau. On the surface, he's a palace guard, low rank, eyes too sharp, hands too still. The kind of man who never blinks when he lies. You've heard of him before, always lurking at the edges of power, never important enough to be missed, always present when someone vanishes. He shouldn't be talking to the bride, he shouldn't even know where the dressing room is, and yet here he is, laughing with her handmaid, accepting a date cake, making himself very comfortable. The bride, Satsubek, is young, barely 16, marrying a high-ranking official nearly 3 times her age. She's a political piece being slotted into place. Charming, pretty, and entirely expendable. Her dowry was negotiated by uncles, her veil chosen by priests, and her voice notably absent from every scroll announcing the ceremony. In short, no one expected her to be noticed. But Setau noticed. Weeks ago, apparently. According to the laundry staff, and God's bless the laundry staff, he's been slipping notes to her through the palace kitchens, folded inside figs, tied around the stems of lotus flowers. One such note, half burned in a brazier, read, "If you say yes, I'll bring a knife and a promise." You're still unsure if that was a love letter or a death threat. Now here's the weird part. The ceremony goes ahead. Satsubek walks the procession route. She stands beside her groom under the canopied altar. The priests chant, the musicians play, the offerings are burned, and when the moment comes for the final binding vow, the one that seals her to her husband before gods and state, she hesitates. It's barely a flicker, but you catch it. Her eyes scan the crowd. She's not looking at the groom, she's looking for him. She finds him. Setau stands in the back, disguised as a servant again, holding a jug of wine that doesn't belong to anyone. He nods, just once. And somehow, impossibly, it's enough. Because that night, the groom falls ill. Death by sour wine, they say. or heart failure, or divine judgment. The priests scramble to interpret signs, and the palace goes into quiet panic mode. Satsobek, now technically a widow before sunrise, is placed in seclusion for mourning. But Setau is gone. For exactly 5 days, the palace is locked down, every guest interrogated, servants questioned. The high priest of Anubis performs a cleansing ritual over the entire courtyard, and then, on the 6th night, a hawk feather is left on the pillow in Satsobek's chamber. No blood, no note, just the feather. The next morning she is gone. Some claim she escaped by the boat down the Nile, dressed as a merchant's daughter. Others say she never left the palace at all, but was hidden in the queen's private wing under a new name. A few conspiracists whisper that she and Setau vanished into the western desert and became traders, or thieves, or ghost stories. And now for the historical weirdness. In a hidden tomb near Abydos, long sealed, only recently opened, a mural was discovered depicting 2 figures side by side. A woman with an elaborate headdress holding a dagger in one hand and a lotus in the other. The man beside her wears no crown, no formal symbols, but has a falcon perched on his shoulder and a curved blade at his hip. Above them a line of text reads, "Bound not by gods, but by blood and blade." The tomb is unclaimed, no cartouches, no titles, but a ring was found buried inside. Copper, crude, clearly handmade. It bears a scratched inscription on the inside curve, "To the one who asked." Some scholars dismiss the mural as symbolic, a myth retold through local legend. Others believe it's proof that Satsobek and Setau lived, fled, and chose each other over dynasty. A fringe group has even gone as far as reconstructing timelines, trying to match deaths and disappearances to their supposed escape. One argues that they staged the entire wedding as a ruse to cover the assassination of not just the groom, but a rival noble involved in a failed coup attempt, the bride and the assassin as political avengers. You prefer the simpler version, a girl given to power she didn't choose, a man who saw her, not as leverage, but as fire. And together, they didn't just run, they stole their story back. You leave the wedding court long after the guests are gone, after the torches are out and the music's faded. The altar still smells of myrrh, the petals still stick to the floor, and somewhere, far from here, 2 people sleep with knives under their pillows and names they no longer use. The door to the tomb opens with a hiss of stale, ancient air, the kind that tastes like dust and forgotten prayers. You step inside, the flickering torch in your hand throwing shadows across walls that haven't seen daylight in over 3,000 years. And yet, beneath the cobwebs and layers of soot, there they are. 2 figures, carved side by side, not gods and not pharaohs, just people, hands intertwined, faces soft. One wears a royal headdress, the other a commoner's sash. You found the tomb they never meant anyone to find. It's smaller than the ones reserved for royalty, tucked behind a false wall in the necropolis of Saqqara, masked under the guise of a servant's burial. But the craftsmanship? Exquisite. Too refined for someone of low status, and the emotion in the reliefs, too personal to be propaganda. This wasn't a tomb built for legacy, it was built for remembrance. And the curse on the door tells you everything. Not the usual warning, no threats of crocodiles devouring your soul or demons weighing your heart like a bag of grain. This one is different, simpler, more poetic, etched in shaky script beneath the lintel. To love against the will of gods is to walk into fire. Let no one disturb the ashes of what we dared. You feel it then, the quiet weight of something unfinished. Here's what the historians know. The pharaoh in question is unidentified, but based on stylistic dating likely ruled during the 21st dynasty, an unstable period, with high priests running the show and kings barely clinging to power. This wasn't a golden age, this was survival dressed in ceremony. And whoever carved this tomb, they were trying to protect something real in a time of masks. The most persistent theory, the royal figure was a queen, either regent or Tsar dowager, possibly even ruling in her own right. The other, her steward, or bodyguard, or perhaps a royal librarian based on the feathered quill depicted above his image. Whoever he wasn't supposed to matter, but he clearly did. They aren't named in the tomb. That's the most haunting part. No hieroglyphs for their titles, no proud lineage, no connection to any temple or known family. Just symbols, a lotus and a reed, intertwined like fingers, a sun setting between two figures standing back to back, a bird flying downward, wings tucked, like a fall taken willingly. And near the back wall, almost hidden beneath a crumbled corner of plaster, a painted scene survives. The queen and the man embracing under a sycamore tree. Between them, a single offering bowl. Inside it, a heart, literal, maybe, symbolic, definite tell-all. Now here's where things get strange. An inscription painted in red ochre, likely added in haste as if done in secret, reads, "She died first. He followed on the day the Nile rose." No date, no names, just that. You glance at your torch. The flame flickers low. What we do know is this. At some point the queen became a problem. There are traces of her name in older scrolls, half erased. Mentions of reforms, of speaking without council approval. One letter from a high priest complains of a woman who wears the crown but not the chains. After that the records go quiet. Some speculate she fell ill. Others suggest she was removed, either imprisoned or encouraged to take her own life. But there's no official burial, no royal tomb, no ceremony, just this hidden place. As for her lover, well, if he was a steward, a scribe, a soldier, his death wouldn't warrant a papyrus, much less a monument. But the care put into this tomb, the detail of the art, the rarity of the pigments, the quality of the stone, tells a different story. Someone grieved here. Someone honoured her. There's one final carving directly above the place where two small burial pits lie side by side, just big enough for a curled body. It's written in demotic, rougher and more emotional than formal hieroglyphs. You run your hand across it carefully. It reads, "I would meet death again if it meant finding you in the dark." The fringe historians call this Egypt's Juliet tomb. They believe the couple buried here chose to die together rather than live apart. Some even claim they were caught, sentenced, and allowed to choose their method, poison perhaps, or ritual starvation. But others think this was a planned exit, a final defiance, a quiet rebellion, entombed with tenderness. Of course, the mainstream scholars dismiss all that. They argue the tomb is symbolic, that no bodies were ever found inside the burial niches, that the entire chamber was a tribute, not a grave, but that doesn't explain the ring found wedged in the wall crack. A ring made of silver and bronze, two metals rarely fused together, inscribed on the inside with just one word, "Mine." You stand still, breathing the same air these two lovers once did, their last air sealed away in stone. You try to picture their final night. Did they light a flame between them? Did they speak, or was silence enough? Did they hold hands until the end, or lie with their backs to each other, sharing courage through warmth? Whatever their fate, they made a choice. In a world where love was allowed only under strict divine rules, where even queens couldn't love freely, they dared to put each other above gods, crowns, and history. And for 3,000 years, no one disturbed them, until now. You're in the kitchen courtyard of a palace that no longer exists, though the rhythm of the place lingers, spice in the air, soot on the walls, the scrape of ladles against copper pots. It's morning, and the cooks are already shouting at each other in the sing-song chaos of routine. But you're not here for bread or stew. You're watching a pair of hands pack a satchel with loaves still warm from the oven, each marked with an imprint on the bottom, not just a baker's signature. Not decorative, these are messages, hidden in dough, smuggled in plain sight. This is love during wartime, played out between a palace servant and a man who has no business receiving gifts from the royal kitchen. His name is Hori, a palace guard stationed at the outer wall, though his real job is more complicated. He's a courier, a watcher, an unofficial link between the royal scribes and a woman who technically shouldn't be here. Her name is Nebet, and she's not nobility, not even close. She was assigned to kitchen duty 5 years ago, traded from a temple estate in a quiet deal that nobody talks about. On paper, she's nothing, barely literate, unpaid, unranked. But she reads, and she writes. And someone, possibly a lonely scribe or maybe a lover from her past, once taught her to encode a message using burn marks and dough patterns. 3 diagonal slashes mean danger. A single indentation, wait for me. A cracked crust, do not trust the guards. The first loaves were innocent, wrapped in linen, tossed into the cart like everything else. But then Hori started asking for them by name. The Nubian loaf, he would say, the one with the sesame. Always the same one, always from her hands. And one day, inside a hollowed-out core, he found a scrap of linen soaked in jasmine oil. On it, a single sentence, stitched with dark thread. "You are more than your post." What began as curiosity became routine, then ritual. He brought her dried figs from the outer stalls, a reed comb, a carved bone needle. She baked him apricot bread, each loaf scored with lines only he could read. But what pushed it from affection to obsession wasn't the gifts, it was the information. Hori started noticing things, names missing from the guard roster, sealed scrolls vanishing from the temple courier's bags, orders whispered rather than written. And Nebet. She started asking questions. Together, they began piecing together a secret. Someone in the royal court was rerouting supplies, food, ritual items, military rations. Items that should have gone to the Temple of Karnak were appearing at smaller, less public shrines. Gold meant for an offering ceremony was miscounted and never seen again. Letters from Thebes stopped arriving. And all of this seemed to orbit one person, the Queen's cousin, a minor official with a penchant for perfume and a dangerous habit of eliminating rivals via misfortunate accidents. Nebet and Hori couldn't expose him officially. Neither had rank. But they could leak. They could warn. They could resist. Their loaf system became an underground current. Warnings passed through the kitchens, confirmations baked into barley cakes. One particular message, found inside a honey pastry, "Poison will be in the incense tonight." Another, "He wears a copper ring with a false seal." It worked, for a while, until it didn't. One morning Hori didn't show up. The guards at the outer gate shrugged, said he'd been reassigned. No explanation. Nebet kept baking for days, hoping, waiting. She sent a loaf with 4 vertical slashes, her code for "Are you safe?" but it came back untouched. The next day a new guard appeared at the kitchen courtyard. Young, too polite, eyes like cold water. He asked for the Nubian loaf, smiled when he said it. She never baked again. Nebet was pulled from her post that night. No charges, no trial, just gone. But here's the part the scribes didn't scrub. 2 months later, a smuggled note reached the Temple of Khonsu in Thebes, carried by a merchant's daughter and disguised as a hymn. The note included the burn pattern for lyre in red linen, a reference to the Queen's cousin, who had recently, coincidentally, fallen into the Nile and drowned. Another figure in the corruption network was poisoned during a blessing ritual. A third vanished entirely. Someone had finished what Nebet and Hori started. Now here's where the theories spiral. Some say Hori escaped, that he was imprisoned, tortured and released by a sympathetic captain who owed him a favour. Others believe he returned to the court under a new name, working in shadows to dismantle the network from within. And Nebet? Some claim she survived, hidden by the temple priestesses, living out her life teaching novice girls how to read dough like scripture. One recent discovery adds weight to that theory. A ceramic baking tray unearthed in a workers' village bearing 7 identical score marks. No one could explain the pattern until a retired cryptologist matched it to a known rebel code from the late period. The translation? "I fed the king and the people, and only one tried to poison me." Poetic, sharp, so very her. You linger in the courtyard where her ovens once glowed. The fire pits are cold now, overgrown with weeds, the breadstones cracked. But you can still smell flour in the crevices. Still imagine her standing barefoot by the flame, folding secrets into crusts while pretending to be invisible. She was a woman without title, without armour, without the right to speak. But she spoke anyway, and a kingdom trembled. You arrive just as the musicians go silent, their instruments still cradled in their arms, eyes darting nervously across the banquet hall. Something's wrong. You feel it in the air, thick and sour as though the wine turned to vinegar mid-pour. Around you, nobles shift in their seats, fanning themselves without rhythm, eyes flicking to the dais where 3 women sit dressed in identical linen robes, gold collars, and matching forced smiles, the wives, royal, resplendent, and apparently locked in a so-quiet war that's about to turn deadly. The meal's elaborate. Roasted duck, dates kfeezed in honey, skewers of figs, salted fish so fresh it still smells of the river. Guests pick at their food like it's been cursed, which if the whispers are true it has. You slide behind a pillar, near enough to hear the steward whisper into the ear of a minor noble. The 3rd wife hasn't eaten in 2 days. She's waiting for the others to try the stew first. And just like that, you're in the middle of one of Egypt's most quietly lethal traditions, a royal kitchen cold war. No knives, no drawn swords, just poisoned platters and measured glances. The man at the centre of it, Pharaoh Nefertiti, is nowhere in sight. Too sick to attend, or too smart. He married all 3 women within a span of 7 years, each one carefully selected for her alliance value. First wife, Nefertiti, daughter of a powerful Theban governor. Second, Tawaretka, a cousin of the high priest of Ptah. And third, Hukmose, whose beauty made her famous before her father offered her to the court like a gilded figurine. Each one with a reason to hate the others. Each one with motive. The tension has been building for months. First, Nefertiti's favourite servant mysteriously drowned in the palace pool, her mouth stained blue. Then Tawaretka's lapdog vanished, only to be found skinned and hung behind the stables. Ahmose, youngest and newest to the game, made a bold move by commissioning her own private shrine inside the Temple of Hathor, a move traditionally reserved for the chief queen, a declaration of war. If you ask anyone in the kitchens, the poisoning attempt starts subtly, a slice of melon left unattended, wine served at the wrong temperature. One night, Nefertiti's soup curdles in its bowl before she touches it. Another evening, Tawaretka's goblet shatters in her hand, no explanation given. A palace nurse confides that Ahmose wakes each morning with her food tasted by 2 separate eunuchs. You begin to wonder if anyone is actually eating anything. And then, at this feast, someone finally slips up. The second course, a delicate lamb stew, simmered in mint and date wine, is brought out by the head steward himself, a rare occurrence. He bows, presents it with exaggerated grace, then steps back. No one moves, until Ahmose reaches for her spoon. That's when Tawaretka lunges. It's subtle. A sharp elbow bump, a dropped goblet, a splash of wine, but the message is unmistakable. Stop, don't eat that. The room holds its breath. Ahmose stares at her, long, cold, then sets the spoon down with a smile so slow it could slice granite. The feast continues, but everyone knows the night has ended. By morning, the steward is dead, found face down in a water basin, blood trickling from his nose. No signs of struggle, no obvious cause. The royal physician declares it natural causes. No one believes it. Within the week, Nefertiti retreats to her father's estate in Thebes. For her health, the court announces. 2 months later, Tawaretka joins a delegation to Nubia and never returns. Ahmose surprisingly remains silent. But here's the curious part. A new mural appears in the Temple of Hathor barely a season later. It depicts 3 lotus flowers, one in bloom, one wilting, one fallen to the ground. No figures, no text, but the meaning is clear to anyone paying attention. Some historians believe the story is exaggerated, that the poisoning was rumour, that the wives were simply victims of palace politics. But fragments of personal letters recovered from a burned storage room suggest otherwise. One, allegedly written by a chambermaid, reads, "She laughed when the others left. She said she didn't need to lift a blade if they cut each other first." Which she may have done, or may have watched. The scholars debate whether Ahmose orchestrated the entire thing or merely outlasted it. Was she calculating or just lucky? One fringe theory insists she used a rare narcotic derived from blue lotus and honey, something that leaves no trace in the bloodstream but causes hallucinations and eventual organ failure if given in small doses. The theory is supported by the discovery of a broken lotus vial near the steward's chamber, but it was dismissed due to lack of official documentation, naturally. The most poetic explanation comes from a single scratched line on the inside of a cosmetics box found in what was likely Ahmose's chamber. "They drank from my cup. I only smiled." You return to the banquet hall weeks later. The dishes are gone, the floors scrubbed, the air fresh with acacia oil. Nothing to suggest a quiet bloodbath occurred here. Just the memory of glances and spoons and plates that were never truly clean. And somewhere, Ahmose still rules, not with titles, but with patience. She didn't poison anyone, according to the scribes. She simply served the food. It's long past midnight, and the palace is sleeping, except you, of course. You're crouched on the outer wall, dressed like a torch runner, and sweating through layers of linen. Because tonight, you're not following a general or a priest or a pharaoh. You're following a prince who's pretending not to be a prince. Who's taken off his jewellery, tied back his hair, and slipped out of the royal wing in a guard's uniform that doesn't quite fit his shoulders. His name is Kemet, fourth son of Pharaoh Ramses IV. Too far down the line of succession to matter. Too charming to ignore. He's 17, fearless in that exhausting adolescent way, and convinced he's in love with a girl who works in the records hall. The records hall, you really can't make this stuff up. Her name is Beketra. She's a scroll cleaner. Not even a scribe, not officially. Her job is to keep the ancient papyri dry, uncurled, and free of ink rot. A quiet life, largely invisible. But Kemet saw her one day during a ceremony. She was carrying a tray of ink bowls past the high platform, her braid falling loose behind her ear, and that was it. It wasn't lust. Not exactly. It was the hunger for something real. He started visiting the archives under the pretense of educational curiosity, asking questions about temple history, requesting access to royal birth records. She answered politely. Eventually, he stopped pretending, so did she. They started meeting late at night. He'd sneak out in a guard's cloak, she'd leave the scroll room unlocked. He'd bring figs, she'd bring charcoal sketches. He was fascinated with her drawings, especially the ones she made of the stars. Their affair was like a poem no one dared write down. Messy, tender, and stupidly sweet. But of course, love like that doesn't last long in a place like this. One night someone saw them, a junior priest, half drunk on the festival wine, stumbling through the gardens. He didn't report it immediately. He waited, watched, and when he saw Kemet kiss her under a sycamore tree, full moon, exposed, reckless, he went straight to the chief vizier. The punishment should have been immediate, but it wasn't, because the vizier was clever, and Kemet was still a prince, and things in the palace are never straightforward. Instead, the vizier devised something worse than punishment. He watched them for weeks. He allowed it to continue, waiting to gather enough evidence to confront the pharaoh with more than a scandal. He wanted leverage. A way to ensure Kemet never became a political threat. And the best way to do that? Humiliate him, make his love a liability. Then one day, Beketra vanished. No trial, no execution, no exile, just gone. Kemet lost his mind. He tore through the palace records, demanded answers, accused half the staff of treason. The pharaoh ordered him confined to the palace, citing emotional disturbance. He stopped eating, stopped speaking. When he finally did talk again, it was to one person only, his older sister, who was cleverer than all of them, and not fond of the vizier. She found the truth. Beketra had been reassigned to a fortress temple far to the south, a place so remote even birds forgot how to fly there. It wasn't exile, not officially. It was restructuring, a reassignment wrapped in bureaucracy. But it was designed to ensure she never touched another royal hand again. Kemet wanted to leave, to follow her, to renounce his title. The pharaoh laughed, then said no. So Kemet ran. He disguised himself again, this time as a torch runner with an official stamp, forged from his sister's personal seal. He escaped in the early hours, just before dawn, carrying nothing but a water skin, 3 fig cakes, and a scroll with Beketra's last known location. Here's the kicker. He made it. According to a half-decayed travel log found in a collapsed outpost near Elephantine, a stranger arrived unannounced at the fortress temple, asked for Beketra by name, and offered his service as a labourer. No name given, no mention of royal blood. But the description of the man matches Kemet exactly. Broad shoulders, sun-marked skin, and a strange, clumsy way of walking for someone dressed like a commoner. The two were seen together often after that. She returned to her scrolls. He worked in the garden. Locals assumed they were married. No royal pursuit ever came, which naturally means the palace knew where he was and chose not to retrieve him. Some scholars suggest his father allowed it to protect the family name. Others believe his sister brokered a quiet truce, trading his silence for his freedom. But one fragment of a personal letter, found in a sealed jar near the border, says simply, "I forgave him for leaving. He forgave me for surviving." It's unsigned, but a nearby burial pit contained 2 skeletons, side by side, a man and a woman, no jewellery, no markers, just a tiny wooden figurine of a lotus blossom tucked between them, wrapped in faded cloth inked with stars. You're standing near their tomb now, breeze pulling gently at your sleeves. It's simple, humble, easy to miss. And yet, it's the most honest place you've been in weeks. Because somewhere along the way, A prince gave up a crown and got something better. You wake to the smell of burning herbs, thick and strange, like someone's roasting flowers dipped in ink. The chamber around you isn't part of the palace anymore. It's quieter, darker, older. The walls are covered in hand-painted symbols not meant for public display, stars in spirals, eyes that cry blue tears, a cat-headed woman swallowing the moon. This isn't a royal prayer room, it's a sorceress's den. And tonight, you're about to see what happens when love doesn't just defy the gods, but tries to use them. The pharaoh's wife sits in the centre of the chamber, legs folded beneath her, jewellery removed, hair undone. She looks less like a queen and more like a girl who's realised her world is unravelling. Her name is Unet, the third wife of a powerful pharaoh whose name barely fits on a cartouche. He hasn't touched her in months. She hasn't been summoned to his chamber in almost a year. There's a new woman now, a younger one, delicate and bland and chosen by the priests. Unet was not chosen by priests, she was chosen by fire. Not literally, of course, but metaphorically. She was born of a military family known for strategy and storming river forts. She was bold, sharp-tongued, chosen by the pharaoh during a war campaign when she reportedly saved his life by dragging him from a collapsing siege tower. Their marriage was romantic at first, passion mixed with politics, but eventually, like all royal love stories, it became more throne than thunder, so she turned elsewhere, not to a man, not yet, to a woman with ink-stained hands and eyes like obsidian. Her name was Henutewi, and she was a known practitioner of what the temple called unauthorized rites, which is polite language for magic. Henutewi wasn't from any priestly school. She didn't study under scribes. She learned her craft from the desert winds and the shadows that fall long after sunset. The two women met at a river blessing, where Unet stood still while the others chanted, and Henutewi just watched her from the crowd. It started with a conversation. It ended with midnight rituals in a chamber beneath the palace, chalked with salt lines and symbols older than the pantheon. They weren't lovers, not exactly, but there was intimacy, there was power, and between them, they formed a plan. Unet didn't want her husband back, she wanted his attention, his obsession, the very thing she had once inspired and then lost. And so Henutewi mixed a draught, not poison, not entirely, something between a truth serum and a dream, a drink to make him remember, or regret, or both. The first time she slipped it into his wine, nothing happened. The second time he woke screaming, claiming he'd seen her face inside a cobra's mouth. He said she'd cursed his dreams, that he remembered her smile before every battle, and her silence after every kiss. Then the nosebleed started, then the fever. The priests blamed bad figs, a corrupted incense blend. Someone whispered divine punishment, but the pharaoh's scribes issued a decree banning the word curse from all temple scrolls for a full moon cycle. Meanwhile, Unet watched. She sat silently through it all, cloaked in white, eyes soft, voice sweet. But you could tell, her fingers trembled with satisfaction. The spell, if that's what it was, had worked. And here's where it turns, because love and magic don't mix well when one starts asking for more. Unet returned to Henutewi again, this time not for a potion but for a person. There was someone new at court, not the pharaoh, not a rival queen, a scribe, young, male, clever, kind. He'd helped Unet with a speech she was asked to deliver at a festival, something ceremonial and dull, and she'd caught herself laughing at his joke about the gods having poor handwriting. No one made Unet laugh. No one ever could, except him. She began to want something dangerous, not just revenge, connection. But Henutewi saw it happening. She saw Unet's eyes shift, saw the queen beginning to untangle herself from their quiet, poisonous sisterhood. And so the next draught she brewed was different, binding. Henutewi told her it would help win the scribe's affection, that it would draw him toward her without fear, without hesitation. Unet, desperate and aching, believed her. She slipped it into his honeyed wine during a quiet evening in the archives. He died 3 days later. Convulsions, vomiting. His eyes turned white. The official report? A snake bite. Nonsense. He was indoors, surrounded by stone. No one believed it, but no one said otherwise. Unet fell sublimate, refused to eat, refused to pray. Henutewi disappeared. Some say the queen had her executed quietly in the dead of night, buried in a shallow grave behind the western cliffs. Others believe Henatawi vanished into the desert, returning to whatever spirit world she came from. But one recent discovery has thrown everything into question. Inside a sealed jar at the edge of Henatawi's supposed quarters, archaeologists found a scroll fragment. It wasn't religious. It was a poem, unfinished. The last line? She asked for love, but not for limits. I gave her both. And Unit? She lived. For another 2 decades. Never remarried. Never reclaimed her place beside the pharaoh. She became a ghost in her own court, seen only during major festivals, where she wore the same golden collar every year, one engraved not with her husband's name but with an unreadable sigil, believed by some to be a binding glyph. Not for protection, for regret. You leave the chamber of burning herbs with a chill in your spine. Some stories are love stories. Some are revenge stories. But this one never decided which it wanted to be. The tomb was supposed to be empty. That's what the record said. A minor noble's burial sealed during the Third Intermediate Period and robbed centuries ago, its treasures long gone. You're only down here because the team wanted to triple-check the perimeter for collapse risks. But then you found the hidden wall. It wasn't locked, just cleverly bricked over. A false panel that gave way with a soft push and a puff of dust, revealing a narrow corridor slick with old soot. Someone had been down here. Someone had lit a torch and walked into the dark carrying something far more valuable than gold. You creep forward. The chamber beyond is small, cramped, built not for show but for hiding. The walls are blank. No glyphs, no dedications, no gods watching from their perches. Just 2 burial niches side by side sealed with clay bricks. No names, no dates. But lying between them, left out in the open, is the last thing you expected. A necklace, simple but unmistakably old. Faience beads strung together with delicate care, faded from bright turquoise to soft river mud green. The central charm is shaped like a scarab, flanked by 2 lotus petals. You've seen this pattern before, not in any museum catalogue, not in a noble's jewellery inventory. You saw it weeks ago, sketched in the corner of an unfinished love letter pulled from the journal of a known tomb robber. And now you're holding it. Let's rewind. During the late 19th dynasty, a rash of tomb robberies swept through the western valleys. Officially it was poverty, desperation, the collapse of central authority, but one case stands out. Still whispered about by archivists and fringe scholars, a robber known only as Padisu, and the woman he couldn't stop writing about. Her name was Tia. She worked in the embalming workshops, not a priestess, an assistant. She cleaned tools, mixed oils, washed bodies, lived in a mud brick hut outside the necropolis. She shouldn't have mattered, but Padisu met her during a job, looting a poorly guarded tomb near the artisan's quarter. She caught him in the act, but instead of screaming, she looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You missed a seal on the west wall." That was their beginning. She patched up his injuries after he ran from a patrol. He brought her bread and oil when supplies ran thin. They slept in shifts in her hut, living between corpses and crime, laughing in whispers as if they weren't breaking half the laws of the kingdom. But the thing is, they weren't just stealing gold. Tia had access to records, the hidden ledgers of what was buried with whom, which tombs were under guard, which ones were sealed in name only. She fed him that information, quietly, carefully, and in return Padisu gave her something no man had before. Safety. Not protection, safety. The feeling of being chosen, of being trusted. Their crimes escalated. Together they breached 5 royal tombs, each one more daring than the last. They never took everything, just select pieces, items small enough to pass off as heirlooms or lost trinkets. A ring here, a charm there, once a tiny amulet of Ma'at plucked from beneath a noblewoman's arm like a prayer whispered into silence. But it wasn't greed. Not really. It was escape. They were saving up to disappear, to leave Egypt entirely, sail north, maybe blend in with a merchant caravan, change their names, start a life with no ghosts. And then came the final job. A newly sealed tomb rumoured to belong to the daughter of a pharaoh. High security, no floor map, no known layout. Padisu wanted to skip it. Tia insisted. She'd seen the burial list, knew there was a scroll buried with her, not a religious text, a confession, something dangerous, something political, worth far more than gold. They never came out. All records of them vanish after that night. No bodies found, no arrests made, just silence. Until now. because the moment you touch the necklace, something shifts. You shine your light on the bricks sealing the burial niches. Both are roughly mortared. Rushed work, but one bears a faint carving, just barely visible under the grime, a lotus and a scarab. And beneath it, in tiny demotic script, we left the world as thieves and entered this tomb as lovers. This is their grave. No coffins, no gold, just clay and quiet. The fringe historians have long speculated about the lovers of the necropolis, a myth built around one of Padisu's recovered letters, which ends with, "I will find you even if the jackals take me first." That line was written in soot on a temple wall years later, attributed to a nameless gravedigger. Most dismissed it as romantic nonsense. But you're here now, holding the necklace, standing in the final resting place of two people who risked everything not for power, but for each other. And here's the final strange detail. A recent analysis of smuggled artifacts confiscated at a Cairo port included a scarab that perfectly matches the one in the necklace. Same mould, same imperfection in the lower edge, but it was found miles from here embedded in a broken vase, as if someone else had tried to copy it, or bury the memory. Someone didn't want them to be remembered. Too bad. You light a second torch, set it in the bracket between their burial sites and walk out slowly. The necklace still warm in your palm. They weren't kings, weren't priests. They stole from the dead and risked being erased. But their love outlived the gold. And that's the real treasure. Modern Egypt hums under the weight of honking taxis and the metallic lull of call to prayer drifting over tangled rooftops. You're not in ancient Thebes or tucked inside a tomb today. You're in a sun-choked alley behind the Cairo Museum, your shirt stuck to your back and your notes fluttering in the breeze. Because today, you're not chasing a love affair from the past, you're chasing a scholar who stumbled straight into one. Her name is Dr. Layla Mahfouz, professor of Egyptology at Alexandria University, author of 3 books and respected field leader. Rational, methodical, the kind of woman who scoffs at stories of secret lovers and forbidden affairs buried under dynastic rubble. At least she was, until last summer. That's when she discovered the letter. It came folded inside a linen-bound package of old field notes sent from a retired French archaeologist. Just scribbles, mostly. Weather conditions, artifact dimensions, a detailed rant about the incompetence of a certain rival dig team. But tucked between 2 inventory pages was a scrap of papyrus barely 4 inches across. Not part of the official catalogue, not even labelled. Just a piece of something someone once wrote. It read, "Your name is the weight on my chest I refuse to lift." No context, no date, but the script was old. Very old. Late 18th dynasty, maybe. And the ink used? A mixture of black and faint red, often used in emotional or personal writings. That combination alone was enough to send Layla into a spiral of late-night research. Within a week, she'd cancelled 2 lectures and filed for funding. Within 2 months, she was digging again. She focused her team on a lesser-known ruin at El Kab, a dusty cliffside site most had dismissed as irrelevant. Just a few crumbling noble tombs, mostly robbed, a few shrines, nothing grand. But Layla didn't care about grandeur. She was hunting the writer. The voice behind that line, the person whose grief or longing had spilled into the papyrus like it was trying to outrun time. And that's when she found the tomb. It wasn't even a full tomb, really, just a cave with 2 broken pillars and a sealed recess in the wall that the locals believed was cursed. Most had avoided it. But Layla, armed with ground-penetrating radar and a scholar's obsession, ignored the warnings. Inside the wall they found bones. 2 bodies, 1 male, 1 female. But the layout was all wrong. No mummification, no canopic jars, no funerary goods. Instead, the pair were wrapped in thick linen, huddled together, arms clasped across each other's ribs. Not royal, not priestly, but the embrace, deliberate, protective, and beside them, tucked beneath the woman's shoulder, was another scrap of papyrus, faded nearly beyond recognition, but readable with the right equipment. Layla's translation, "You cannot be named in my house, but I built this tomb for you." Now, this is where the real debates began. The man, based on his bones, had been tall, strong, with signs of healed fractures, likely a soldier. The woman's skull showed signs of cranial modification. a technique occasionally used among elite foreign-born women brought into Egyptian court life during diplomatic marriages. So the theory? She was a foreign bride, a diplomatic wife to a royal, given as a gesture of peace, resented, hidden, kept in shadow, and the man? A guard, assigned to watch her, not to love her. Too bad, they died together. No sign of trauma, possibly disease, possibly poison. But whatever happened, it happened together. And the tomb, rough as it was clearly carved with purpose. A love letter etched into stone with sweat and stolen hours. Layla couldn't let it go. She spent 6 months in that cave documenting everything, refusing to let museum officials relocate the remains. Her grant money dried up, her colleagues rolled their eyes. She started speaking more about emotional archaeology in interviews. Her university stopped returning her calls, but she was right about one thing: the writing matched. Both scraps, the one in the package and the one in the tomb, were from the same hand, same slant, same pressure, same mix of ink. This was a man who died beside the woman he couldn't speak of in daylight, who left behind notes not for history but for himself, as if he knew, somehow, that someone someday would read them and understand. Layla became the first. And then, in a twist no one saw coming, she vanished. She missed a symposium in London, skipped a keynote speech in Aswan. Her apartment in Alexandria was found intact, books open, teacups still on the counter. No sign of struggle, no note, just gone. And this is where the story gets blurry. One local dig assistant claims to have seen her near the Nile, wearing local robes, speaking softly to a man whose face he didn't recognize. Others dismiss that. Say she burned out or broke down or slipped away to avoid scandal. But a few, those who knew her best, believe she followed the voice in the letters, that she left academia to find a quiet life, somewhere the desert meets the river, where tombs can stay sealed and love doesn't need an audience. There's one final twist. Recently a tourist stumbled across a smooth stone near El Kab, half buried beneath an acacia tree. It bore a single line, carved hastily, and left to the elements. Found you. Just that. Maybe it's coincidence. Or maybe history, once again, has wrapped its arms around someone who dared to remember. You're standing at the edge of the Valley of the Kings, the kind of place where silence hums like a second heartbeat and the sun feels older than time. The cliffs rise like cracked teeth around you, watching, remembering. This is where Egypt buried its greatest: pharaohs, high priests, royal architects, all tucked into the earth with enough gold to outshine eternity. But there's one tomb you won't find on any official map. No guide points to it. No plaque marks its entrance. Because it belongs to someone no one was supposed to remember. Her name was Merit, and she was the lover of a god, or at least that's what she told people. The story goes like this. Merit was born into a family of tomb painters. Her father painted the eyes of Osiris. Her mother mixed the blue pigment used for the heavens. She was supposed to marry a plasterer, live quietly in Deir el-Medina. But from an early age, she was different. She'd wander off during work hours, sketching in the dust or carving symbols into her own skin with tiny reeds, whispering phrases that made her mother cry and her father drink more wine. By 16, she was painting on tomb walls herself, illegally. She snuck into her father's work sites at night and added hidden details to commissioned murals. A curl of hair too long, a lover's hand where only prayer was meant to be. At first, no one noticed. Then they did. She was caught altering a depiction of the goddess Hathor, adding a human figure beside her, faceless, but clearly intimate. The image was scrubbed, her family was fined, she was banned from working in tombs again. That should have ended her story. Instead, it began a new one. She didn't stop painting, she just changed where. Beneath the cliffs, near a limestone overhang, most considered cursed due to a rockfall decades earlier, she began carving a tomb of her own. Not for a pharaoh, not for herself. For him. Who was he? No one knows. He appears again and again in her murals, tall, often faceless, sometimes drawn with jackal ears, sometimes with a falcon's head, always standing just a breath behind her. In one image, she's kneeling beside him, reaching toward the stars while he presses a hand to her chest. In another, they walk side by side through a field of reeds, their fingers almost touching. But the real shock is in the inscription at the chamber's center. Carved not in formal hieroglyphs, but in a messy blend of shorthand and personal sigil, it reads, "He is not God, he is not king, He is the one who saw me. Now, most scholars dismiss the tomb as fantasy, a madwoman's delusion, a glorified diary carved into rock. They called Merit a dramatist, an outcast, an eccentric. The tomb was locked up, labelled non-royal graffiti, and forgotten under dust and bureaucracy, until someone broke in. Years later, during a low-budget dig attempting to map ventilation shafts in the valley, a team discovered that Merit's tomb had been disturbed. Nothing stolen, no bones moved, but something had been added. A second inscription, lower, rougher, written in the same style, but clearly by a different hand. It said, "I came back." And next to it, laid gently in a bowl of blue lotus petals, was a man's ring, gold, unmarked, bent slightly at the edge like it had been clenched too tight for too long. So now the theory spirals. Some believe the faceless man was real, a scribe, a guard, a priest who had taken a vow of celibacy and broken it for her, that he disappeared after she was punished, that she waited for him in stone, and that, years later, he found her again. Others say she imagined him entirely, that the entire tomb was a metaphor, a lifelong love for a person who never truly existed, an artist's devotion not to a man, but to the idea of being seen, understood, loved. And then there's the fringe theory, the one that turns museum curators red in the face, that the man she loved wasn't mortal at all. Some point to the jackal-headed images and say it's Anubis himself, that Merit knew she was chosen by a god, that their connection was spiritual, physical, divine, that the tomb was not built as a shrine to grief but as a reunion point. It's wild, sure, but then again, so was she. You walk through the tomb slowly now, torchlight catching on the edges of the mural. Every brushstroke is deliberate, every symbol vibrates with emotion, and then you see it. The final scene, painted low near the floor as if meant to be found while crawling, it shows Merit seated beneath a tree, her head tilted back, her arms open, and above her, falling, not flying, a figure with no face, hands outstretched, descending like dust. The caption beneath it reads, "Let them forget my name, I remember his." There's no record of Merit's death, no burial registry, no documented relatives, but someone laid her to rest in that tomb. Someone placed a ring there after hers had gone silent. Someone left a candle stub at the mouth of the tomb, long after the archaeologists stopped looking, because some love stories aren't meant for scrolls or songs or neatly tied endings. Some are carved into stone, hidden in shadows, left to bloom in silence. You step back out into the valley, the sun bright now, warming your face. The tomb behind you disappears into rock again, quiet and watching. And you realise, this whole time you've been chasing forbidden lovers through temples and palaces and ruins, but not to expose them, not to judge them, to find them, to make sure someone, somewhere, remembered. And now you do. And now, as the sands settle and the last whispers of incense fade into the hush of night, you're back where you began, tucked beneath a soft blanket, eyes a little heavier, heart a little fuller. You've travelled far, haven't you? Not just across deserts and dynasties, but into secret chambers of longing that echo deeper than stone ever could. From stolen kisses behind temple walls to quiet embraces inside tombs never meant to be found, you've traced the pulse of love where it wasn't supposed to exist, and yet always did. Ancient Egypt left us pyramids, golden masks, monuments that scrape the sky. But it also left us these fragile things, a linen-wrapped note, a name scratched on a forgotten pillar, a ring buried in the arms of someone who dared to want. And you felt every beat of it. Because no matter how divine they claim their rulers were, or how carefully the priests wrote the rules, hearts still betrayed the blueprint. Princes fell for servants, queens mourned scribes, thieves died holding each other's hands. Love didn't care about bloodlines or gods or curses carved in limestone. It just happened, messy, dangerous, glorious, and somehow it survived. You, dear traveller, survived it too. All 25 tales. You wandered through shadowed halls and moonlit gardens. You spied, you listened in, and you dreamed. Maybe you even rooted for a few of them, the doomed ones, the reckless ones, the ones who only had a moment. Now the night is cooling around you. The fan hums gently. Maybe there's a breeze through the window, or just the steady beat of your own breath slowing. The past is quiet now. The lovers have all been laid to rest, some in gold, some in silence, but all remain on board, so go ahead. Close your eyes, you've earned your rest.